So, thank you everyone for tuning in to yet another episode in which I talk about issues related to public transport. And hi, Toronto Gaming. You will be very happy to know that our topic for today is a crayon session for cities, and I'm going to bound the crayon session as cities that have little to no rapid transit, and this includes LA. So what I mean by little to no, LA has rapid transit. Okay, I mock LA for not having transit, but I mean it in the level of it. I mean on the level of it having very weak ridership for its size in terms of absolute, not even just ridership, absolute size of network. LA has a bunch of light rail lines and 1.5 subway lines. That's not nothing. It's just very little compared with the size of LA, which is not that much less than that of New York. Metro area to metro area. But I would not want to crayon something with a very large installed base of things where it's mostly extensions. For example, Chicago. Now, Chicago is not New York. Chicago is not Berlin. Chicago is not Paris. Chicago is certainly not Tokyo. But Chicago has a bunch of lines. They get ridership. The model split in Metro Chicago on the eve of Corona, I want to say, was 13%, which is not great. Germany, for the record, in Mobilität in Deutschland 2017, Germany, I believe, was 16% for work trips. So Chicago is less than the average in Germany. The average in Germany includes a lot of Bavarian assholes who used to measure their worth by how much they were saving money more than everyone else, and now they measure their worth in the American style, so how big their SUVs are. But Berlin is also in Germany, and so Chicago has its own internal Berlins. Or internal Munich, so shouldn't slag on all of Bavaria. Bavaria has nice things. It's just Munich. And so we're not going to do something like Chicago or even Philadelphia. I might devote a video to these cities later. We're going to talk about things, again, that either have literally nothing. We're talking Dallas or Houston, things that, I guess they have like rail networks, but they don't have subway networks. Dallas is planning a subway. Don't remember the status of the plans, where they are on the scale between are about to break ground to lol, but I know that there are such plans, and I think the same is true of Austin. Houston is the one that doesn't have such plans. So all of these are viable. LA, of course, San Diego. I'm not gonna do Seattle because, first of all, Seattle is, I would at this point class it with Chicago and not with LA, and second, because, and possibly more importantly, there is actually an expert on Seattle in my research group. This expert's name is Eric Goldwyn, and he is the titular head of the research group. You do not want to see me vlog about Seattle. You want to see him write about Seattle, which he does. My added value in this is not much because I trust Eric's judgment on this thing, and Eric does talk about Seattle. They appointed him to some, I believe, unpaid advisor position on the board with a bunch of other people. But in Europe, of course, no city of significant size in Western Europe or the nicer parts of Eastern Europe lacks a substantial metro system. Unless you're starting to count the Zürich model or something where, Zürich does not have a metro system, but it does have 2 S-Bahn tunnels. But Eastern Europe might go on the docket, places that are a little bit too poor. So I know that Cluj, I'm not going to talk about Cluj, but Cluj just announced that they're going to build a not very expensive subway system. Why yes, Gray in New York and not Chicago? Because I'm also not talking about New York during this video. I've devoted special videos to New York. Where does Eric write about Seattle? I don't actually know. I think he might. I don't think he's written articles that are topics as Eric writes about Seattle, but there are a lot of Seattle references in our report. You want to look at the synthesis because we didn't do a full case study. But anyway, in Cluj, there's I think it would be the last. The bottommost line in the on the spreadsheet. Yep. So Cluj just announced, this is a link, that they're going to build a subway. It came kind of out of the blue because it's done by engineers and other politicians, and this is the cost. This is in dollars. Somewhat below average. At this point, the average is around 300, I believe. So we're not going to talk about Cluj just because, again, I have very little basis for it. I don't think Flair is here. Were Flair here, I might actually have discussed Belgrade, which is it's a poor Eastern European city. And when I say poor, I don't mean poor in the sense that Warsaw is poor. It is not poor. I mean, like, Serbia is a lot poorer. So only now are they going through the process of building a metro in Belgrade. From what Flair told me, the tram system in Belgrade is very well used and very, very overcrowded, very, very uncomfortable from the crowding. So this is certainly something that should happen, and I'm happy to report that there are plans for this. It's supposed to actually happen. I cannot tell you more because I don't know Serbia very well, and I haven't followed up very much to see. I think it was maybe a 2-line system or a 3-line system that they were going to build at once. But yeah, this is a place that definitely needs a metro. And again, I'm not going to start crayoning because actual professionals have done the crayon, and the actual professionals are very likely to actually build this crayon. I believe it's done by EU companies, not Russian companies. As I understand it, Serbia's so Serbia really wants to be Russia. Serbia has a lot of cultural cringe toward Russia specifically. Essentially, it's the only, I think it might actually be the only country in Europe outside Russia where the majority of the population actually supports Russia. Belarus, it's unclear, never trust the polity of Belarus, but most likely the majority of the population did vote for Tikhanovskaya and not Lukashenko, so they want to move away. Serbia, because they got bombed by NATO 25 years ago, the population there is rather anti-NATO and pro-Russian. But that's usually geopolitical. It's kind of weird. So on the one hand, they hate NATO. On the other hand, they're trying to join the EU. In economic terms, they're trying to be Western Europe, same as everywhere else in Eastern Europe. I think they actually have the most advanced application among the countries that are not in the EU that are trying to join. Like, obviously, if, let's say, Iceland and Norway wanted to join, it would be very quick because facts democracies, but they don't want to join, or Switzerland, same thing. But among the countries that are trying to join, which are all Eastern European, I believe Serbia actually has the most advanced application in terms of all the regulatory changes. The problem is, first of all, it's not complete, and second, the EU today is probably going to be very reluctant to give them to invite them to a club that has veto power over decisions that are sometimes geopolitical. So it's not just me saying, "Oh, they're Putinists, don't let them in." It's like serious bureaucrats say that. But anyway, so I'm probably not gonna. But anyway, I'm not gonna talk about Belgrade unless people really want me to, and people and like walk through and want to walk me through the plan. Ditto other Western Balkan stuff. So Zagreb actually has one of the larger tram systems up there. In my video from somewhere over a year ago about tramway systems, in which I was talking a lot about the Eastern European ones because they're the largest in the world. The largest in the world that are not Eastern Europe are Vienna, Ile-de-France, and Zurich in that order, maybe. And then everything else, it's like, I think the biggest in the world are Praga, Budapest, and St. Petersburg. I do not know in that order. So anyway, Zagreb has a rather big tramway network. I don't know enough about it to know whether it would make for a good metro system. Hungary has essentially one city. That city has 4 metro lines. It, I don't think, has any concrete plans to build a 5th because the costs of the 4th were bad. Like, really bad. Now, speaking of Hungary, and before I actually go into the actual topic of the video, so the year that I'm quoting here is 2010. That's midpoint of construction, and I always round down. So for example, 2010 and 2015 in this line, the line extension in Praga, I say I deflate to 2012. But anyway, so this is line from 06 to 14. So it was let in 06. So the contracts were let in the mid 2000s. Now Orban takes power 2010. Which means that Orban actually can, if asked about the very high cost of this, which the EU has investigated, say, I was not even in charge. This was all MSZP. Putting it all on MSZP is something that you absolutely can say. MSZP is not very popular in Hungary. They're not very popular in Western Europe. They're essentially just they're a communist party that rebranded itself as Social Democratic after the Cold War ended. They're not at all the sort of progressive party that the Eurocrats like. He did not do so. He instead said that he's being witch hunted and something. Like, essentially, this was before Orban, and I believe that under Orban things have gotten considerably worse. Just no metro line, because I don't know if it's because it's just cost ineffective, or if he's punishing Budapest for being an opposition city. I don't know enough about that dynamic. Would not surprise me if he were trying to punish Budapest. Although I will say that Erdogan hasn't really underinvested in the cities. Like, so Izmir, so in Izmir, and this is something that I learned very early on in the TCP from Elif, is that Izmir, first of all, has been held by CHP since forever, whereas in Istanbul it's more recent. I don't remember when Imamoglu first won. I want to say 2018. So Istanbul is maybe at this point solidly opposition, but certainly in the 2000s, 2010s, Istanbul was a swing city, and so was Ankara. Izmir was opposition. So essentially, what happened with these lines, which as you can see are rather cheap because Turkey, what happened was there were two sets of numbers depending on what you counted. I believe they differed by like 10% or 20%. I think it was with unspent contingency or without or something like that. And the Turkish government was publishing the higher end numbers, which means that at the time, Erdogan's involvement in screwing over Izmir was saying that the lines cost something like 10 or 20% more than they actually did. Again, more of this, like something more substantial happened more recently when Imamoglu won in Istanbul, and Erdogan started denying state funding for this, but instead Istanbul got favorable terms from the European Investment Bank, which hates Erdogan. This is something that absolutely should also be available to Budapest. I mean, the EIB hates Orban the same way. And so, again, I can't tell you whether there's a good fifth line to be built in Budapest, or Budapest also has a bunch of commuter lines that don't really, it has a bunch of these commuter lines that I don't actually know if there's any through running, but a lot of them just don't through run, certainly. So again, I can't crayon Budapest for you. There's going to be a lot of installed stuff, a lot of real plans made by serious people who probably wish that they could build with less government corruption. So this is why I'm not going to touch Budapest. I prefer to touch places where I think I can actually contribute. So let's drop Europe at this point, just because I haven't seen anything especially drunk proposed in here. I mean, again, some of the really squiggly plans for Warszawa are kind of weird, but by the standards of things that actually happen in American cities, and I don't mean that they're car oriented, I mean just the way the lines squiggle, it's not that big a deal. So in LA, so let's go to the actual topic of this video, 15 minutes in, and talk about LA, because... Oh, hi, Steffi. No Budapest commuter train through running. Ugh, that is terrible, and I'm sorry. Yeah, this again, it's something that they might want to do, but I don't know Budapest well enough. I imagine you do. To say, oh, they should build this, they should connect these lines. This is an actual plan that is not happening because Orban. This is a plan that isn't happening because NIMBYs. This is a plan that isn't happening that everyone wants to happen, but because of some routing issues, the costs are higher than they should be. I don't know enough about Hungary. Yeah, okay, so about Rip Elena. So I have a crayon here that I clicked on before we started recording, and I'm not going to click on it again. And I'm sorry, and the reason is that it's crayon that I made. So the main reason I'm not going to click on it is jank. The jank being this is something that I ported from a previous computer. I think maybe even 2 computers ago, which means it has a lot of artifacts from like essentially the stations. The way the stations look is the pictures didn't port through, and so it just looks bad. Which means that this is likely that certainly this is a map that I made before 2017, possibly before 2013. So so first of all, there are some things that about my thinking that have changed. There are plans that have kind of been set in stone since not that many. I mean, things like I did take into account things like the regional connector. I'm not that much of a shit on real plans type person. But for example, I think there have been new branches of the Orange Line that I didn't take into account because I at the time was assuming they would just convert it to a light rail, and no. So let's talk about LA, and this means I need to build the crayon anew, and this is going to take a while. And Google Earth, and the thing is, I didn't so usually when I do crayon, I do it in Inkscape, right? Because what just happened? Yeah, X marks the spot, yeah. Do I have an overlay of just existing lines? This is how the overlay looks. Like the native layer in Google Earth is not at all is not at all what's the word for this? Good, probably is the best way to describe it. Okay, so this is LA, and in case people wonder why I say rail concept, since I started doing this in Google Earth, which goes back to 2010, I call every crayon concept. You can see a little bit of this here. Metro concept, Tokyo Rail concept, Chicago Metro concept. Okay, so I'm gonna start drawing. This is wrong because the curve. You see the curve here is a little tighter. This is the red/purple line. I'm gonna start drawing it as purple. Now the lines have since gotten names. People who are more familiar with LA, please remind me what the names are because I still think of these lines by their old colors: red, purple. Sometimes with names like Expo or Crenshaw, but I don't really remember these lines' new names. I believe they're not actually running under Wilshire, or maybe they are. This is all. This is board, I believe. So it's like this, and this is the purple line. This is the purple line as is. And then the red line, you can see the curve. At Vermont, it turns north and then goes under the mountains to Universal City and North Hollywood here. And there, it just connects to the Orange Line buses. So let's not just draw the purple line as is, but the purple line as it's being built. This is a project that is being built. It's a pretty good project. The cost per rider are horrific, but that's fine because the ridership assumes no TOD, and eventually LA will do transit-oriented development. This is where I'm ad-libbing a little bit because, so Wilshire goes like this. So this is how Wilshire goes. And you might be able to tell that, first of all, this is a golf course. because this is the highest and best, and this is the highest value land use in West LA, right next to the second biggest business district in the region, Century City, which on the other side also has a golf course. One of them is the one that didn't admit Jews, the other is the one that does admit Jews. So the one that doesn't admit Jews you can't close because it's anti-Semitic, and the one that that historically didn't, maybe still doesn't, you can't close because they're like because it's the oldest one, the most elite one. And by can't, I mean people will write sternly worded letters and not actually do anything. So first of all, Wilshire goes like this, and second, you can kind of see that if we zoom in that there are big buildings on here, but these are residential. I believe this specific stretch is called Condo Canyon. Now, wisely did the region decide not to go strictly under Wilshire. When Century City is right here, there was even NIMBYism on behalf of people in Beverly Hills over the fact that the curve from Wilshire to the center of Century City, which is here, would pass underneath Beverly High. Beverly High, this might be Beverly High, I'm not sure, has an oil rig on its campus. But I'm saying this first of all to remind people that NIMBYs are the silliest people ever, and second, and more importantly, to point out that I may have small errors in the routing where I prefer to have routings that are as accurate as possible, and this is because this is a little bit of a carve, of carving new right-of-way. And now from here, new tunnels are bored carving back to Wilshire. I don't remember the stop spacing, but it is rather wide. And the reason it's rather wide is, have you seen the land use? So, again, line as is terminates at Western. Now, this area, Koreatown, has some blocks that I never remember if this area is the literal densest residential neighborhood. Hi, sorry about disconnection. Good news, the recording is still working. Yep, it's back. In some places in America, the golf courses are in fact publicly owned, and people call them important greenery, and they even dredge the one working class black person who golfs as a reason why it is not, in fact, a racist use of land. I think Boston, maybe also San Francisco. Boston's the one where I've heard people dredge the but it's in a black neighborhood and it's important greenery, and maybe one person from the hood actually uses the golf course. It's not that the golf courses are more profitable than the houses. It's NBAism. Yeah. Okay. Let's actually read this. Red is A. Sorry, red is B, blue is... Okay, I will... Oh, purple is D. Why are they not sequential? Why is it A, B, C, D, E, L, and not A, B, C, D, E, F? Anyway, let's go back. So my point is actual tall buildings downtown. Not the most centralized downtown, but LA is so big that this is still a big job center. High residential density. This is... I think near tied with Japantown in San Francisco for highest residential density in the United States outside New York City. So again, the trains terminate here at Wilshire and Western. For people to know, the busiest bus corridor in LA is by a big margin Wilshire. So Wilshire is not the busiest bus in the United States. The busiest bus in the United States is, I want to say it's the 1st and 2nd Avenue buses from New York. I think that is still the case even post Second Avenue subway. Maybe within New York it might have changed to Fordham, so BX12. Um, and then maybe, and then actually probably the busiest corridor might be Geary in San Francisco, and then maybe Wilshire. Um, but it is a very busy bus corridor, busiest in LA, one of the busiest in the United States. In LA, at least on pre-corridor numbers, number 2 is Vermont. This is Vermont. The northern part of Vermont is where the red line is. We will talk about South Vermont in a little bit. And then number 3 is Western. So a bunch of north south going toward Hollywood and the inner west side. And I'm not even sure they call this the west side, you know. I think they only call it the west side around here, maybe. And of course, from the south, these buses hit, respectively, the terminus of the subway and the terminus of the part where the subway is not a branch but a trunk. The frequency, I don't know what the frequency is now. The frequency when I visited, which was 10 years ago, was 10 minutes on each branch. Rush hour, 12 minutes, not rush hour. I did, in fact, have to wait 12 minutes for a subway train. It was the wait was longer than the trip. But anyway, Wilshire is the busiest. But the thing is, once you go west of Mid-Wilshire, you get to this. This is the land use. And I asked the people, look, maybe not on the street, but behind the street. Although the parking crater here is charming. As you might be able to tell, the density here can be summarized in the one word, lel. So either you're TRDing this entire area, or you don't have a lot of stops. I believe it goes western, then Highland, maybe? Or La Cineg. Or La Brea. I believe this is an entire 2-mile stretch or something like that without stops. Not even plans for a stop here if they can convince the NIMBYs to fuck off to Texas or Nevada or whatever, while people here build something that is a little more interesting for transit ridership than these types of houses. But the current plan is no station. The red dots are waypoints, are not stations. They're not doing that many stations here. So the point is, very wide stop spacing, sometimes understandable because lol density. The density does pick up here. This is where kind of the early commercial sprawl in LA would go. Things like Miracle Mile, things like how they essentially started gradually moving LA to the west, culminating in the construction of Century City. And so anyway, the plan is to go up until here. This is UCLA. So Century City, big generator of ridership. UCLA, same thing. I think this area is enough of a center that you might be able to get something out of it. And then in the middle, it's kind of garbage. So I was asked to dump on LA. And by I was asked, you can literally scroll up and see what Toronto Gaming said. Time to rip LA a new one. So here I want to make it very clear that the thing I'm mainly ripping LA a new one on this specific line, the Wilshire extension, is this needs slightly larger quantities of transit-oriented development. And by slightly larger, I mean the sort of stuff that Hollywood associates with cyberpunk dystopias. Now, the cyberpunk dystopia is a rather annoying genre because it's a genre that posits that the dystopia is based on the fact that middle-class office workers have to attend boring meetings and the corporate conglomerate world is soulless, and that everything involves big conglomerates controlling your lives. Now, bear in mind, if you're in the United States or in Western Europe today, that world is just, it's retro. There are no big conglomerates. In fact, one of the biggest archetypes of a corporate villain in the last 40 years, the corporate traitor. For example, Gordon Gekko. Specifically, what they did in the 80s was they realized these conglomerates were not very. I mean, Teller paper from the film, from Wall Street, the film, is said to be unprofitable. I believe most of the targets of the corporate traders were profitable. They just were not making a lot of profit relative to their size. So essentially, a corporate trader could come in, take the firm, split it into subsidiaries, and by subsidiaries I mean completely different firms, sell it to different firms, do a lot of high-end layoffs, and somehow make it more profitable. The whole was smaller than the sum of its parts. This was the conglomerates of that era. Now Japan still has the conglomerates, but it's very slowly in decline. The conglomerates, bear in mind Japan is a less economically productive country than the United States or Northern Europe. India is even more conglomerate-y. Like it's the conglomerates are something to do in a specific level of development, is my point, and Cyberpunk kind of leans into that. But the critique of the conglomerates in Cyberpunk is, yeah, they talk about inequality, but for example, it's always you talk about inequality not from the perspective of the worker, but from the perspective of the, for example, in Snow Crash, the embarrassed hacker who had to sell his shares in the early metaverse in order to support his ailing mother. It's never about actual refugees or anything like that. It's a big lacuna in the genre, but at any rate, before I'm turning into too much SFF critique, my point is, one of the annoying things about how Cyberpunk portrays the world as a dystopia is the cities are portrayed as very big. And I will give Neuromancer credit that it kind of understands that the sprawl is very suburby, but even then, kind of like big urban areas kind of bad. Often because they destroyed the charm of the small town or something. Except when I think of the small town, I think of Sinclair Lewis novels, and this kind of animates a lot of people who think that because they find corporate meetings boring, that makes them the vanguard of an oppressed class or something, and therefore when they go and make it harder to build more housing, they're doing praxis. And sure, they're doing praxis, is just reactionary praxis. So yeah, this means turning these buildings into the sort of stuff that's depicted in Blade Runner. That's fine. I mean, hell, in Blade Runner, well, this is not my idea, but I think I learned from G here, where in Blade Runner, the scene where Deckard eats with chopsticks, today that's just something a normal person would do in a large Western city. At the time the film was made, so 40 years ago, this was considered a humiliation, kind of like showing that America cannot compete with Japan, to the point that an ordinary white person would be eating, I think, noodles with chopsticks. That was considered an ew moment. No, of course. As I said, Japan and South Korea are not nearly as economically productive as the United States or Northern Europe, or France, but France is weird in that it has higher unemployment, and the unemployment mostly hits the less productive workers. This is GDP per hour worked. This is not actually very relevant because it's only growth from 15 to 22. And yes, the United States has been doing... I mean, okay, maybe we should not look at 22 because let's do US dollars total. Yeah, okay. This is better. This is 22. Bear in mind that 22 is not the best because the way Europe worked during Corona is it subsidized low-end work in order to prevent there being a mass unemployment crisis. The United States didn't. It gave direct welfare. So essentially, in the United States, there was less work being done, and the GDP held up. So this is a bounce back. Like 2019 would look a little different. But yeah, so US, Northern Europe, up until here, and again, France at this point is well behind the US, which, again, that's I think just a recent artifact and it's going to bounce back. And then Japan, literally the worst in the G7. Turkey is somehow better. The issue with Turkey is very low levels of formal employment, especially among women. So Japan, Korea, yeah. And this is not because they're newly industrialized countries. Like Japan has been stuck at this, like, essentially American working hours in Western European GDP per capita for like 30 years. And yeah, I blame the conglomerate system, and by I mean I'm channeling economists who blame things like the very rigid salaryman system. It makes it harder for new companies to flourish. It makes it harder for companies to hire more talent, to promote based on talent and not FaceTime and seniority. And of course, the FaceTime system also keeps workers hours in the office past where they should probably just go home. They're unproductive, which drives this number down. However, productivity is a very gameable metric. Yeah. Ireland GDP so the GDP per capita in Ireland is fake news. In Ireland, GDP per capita includes the profits of foreign corporations that are headquartered in Dublin for tax evasion purposes. The tax evasion purpose being that in Ireland, the rule as of they're changing the rule because the EU is yelling at them, but the rule has traditionally been that you're considered an Irish corporation owing taxes to Ireland on your global income if actual control is exercised from within the country. In the United States, the rule is that if your formal headquarters is within the country, the norm is one or the other, and then if they're in two different countries, then there's going to be a tax treaty between the two countries saying which of the two. But but absent a tax treaty, it's one or the other. It's inclusive or. Now, the United States doesn't try to collect taxes from wealthy people very hard. So it's not making these changes, and it's and whenever it tries to come up with, and I think at this point the U.S. is actually has been trying to do kind of G7 agreements on kind of doing collective cracking down on tax havens, but a lot of domestic conservatives in the United States hate the idea that the state should have the right to tax dodgers. But at any rate, the issue is that if management lives in the United States and the formal headquarters is in Dublin, it cannot be a sham headquarters, so there needs to be actual work being done there. Thus, for example, Dublin does have quite a lot of tech work, and like big tech offices, but it's obviously not the real headquarters of these corporations. And this way, they don't owe global corporate tax. They, I believe, still owe the United States profits, corporate tax on profits made in the United States, but these are global tech firms. They make most of their profit outside the United States, and on that they just don't pay taxes. Now their profits are still booked in Ireland, which drives up its GDP per capita, but it's fake. But it's a fake number. You want to look at what is the Eurostat number? Primary income balance. Eurostat. This is what you want to look at. Primary income per capita, and let's do PPS, which is purchasing power standard, which is Euro speak for PPP. Okay, so balance of primary income is, I think, what you want. Right? This is income from work, essentially. And the reason you want income from work and not from all sources is that American household income statistics are income from work. I think Singapore and Israel both publish stats that are income from work, so that's kind of the comparable stuff. And yeah, Ireland there, I mean, it's not poor, but it is, like, I think these stats, because again, I can't find them right now very easily, they portray Ireland as, let's say, richer than Southern Europe, poorer than Western Europe, that is not, like poorer than France, for example, I believe. And then Luxembourg is genuinely wealthy, but Luxembourg is also a city. If you commute to Luxembourg from somewhere else, your income is in Luxembourg's, like the value you generate is in Luxembourg's GDP, but it's not in the capita. So this really starts in Norway, or arguably even Switzerland. And yeah. Now I'm just doing this diversion, because yeah. If you in America, yeah. So the United States is really efficient at collecting taxes from individuals and from businesses that are not extremely big. So Italy has a lot of tax dodging. It's very infamous for that. And the tax dodging in Italy is businesses. I believe it's businesses that underreport. It's small businesses that underreport revenue for the purposes of VAT. And this is a big problem in Italy because it means that if you're not taxing small family scale businesses, it means that businesses stay small at family scale. It's called economic dwarfism, and this is a big reason for Italy's economic stagnation. Japan has been like this around 2/3 of the United States continuously for about 30 something years. Italy is recent stagnation. And if I can find a table, and I don't just want latest, I don't want latest data available. So let's end it at 2019 and start it at 1990. Let's do 1990 and see what we can get out of it. Okay. So, 1990, United States is. Can you guys see me? Yeah, I believe everything I'm saying about Italy is also true of Greece, except Greece is poor. Okay, so you say everything. Okay. So US, which is what you should consider yourself as a standard to compare yourself to, is 45.58. UK has pretty continuously been a couple of percent behind. This has gotten more acute more recently. The British economy essentially avoided mass unemployment in the Great Recession because its productivity just crashed. I don't know why. I don't know whether maybe the finance sector got less productive or smaller, and that was a disproportionate decrease in productivity because of British economy, or whether somehow the way that they dealt with labor made it less efficient. I'm not sure, but so pretty big gap Britain to America. Now, so again, remember 45 is the number to compare yourself with for 1990. Italy was literally the same. Italy was on a par with the United States. Germany was on a par with the United States. France was even higher. Now, let's take this to, now Italy starts 45, goes up to about 50, and kind of stays there. So Italy hits 50, like surpasses 50 in 97. And since then, it's gone up from, so the point is that in 20 something years, Italy's had something like 7% increase in GDP per hour worked. Now, over the same period, Germany goes from 53 to 67. So Germany is, and France, same thing. France goes from 53 to 67. So this is what, 14 way 53 is what, 26% maybe. And the United States goes from about 50 to 71, so 40%. So the United States did not have great productivity numbers until the late 90s, and then did better essentially. And then Italy just stagnates. This is and again, Japan's very different. Japan started, went into this at 2/3 America level. This is 31, and is still about 2/3 America. In Italy, the issue is again, it's economic dwarfism. Japan is not like that. Japan is stuck in the later stage where it's a bunch of conglomerates. But, and here's the thing, Japan and Korea are very good at building housing. Or rather, it's not that they're very good at it. I don't think that it costs less to build an apartment building of a certain size in Tokyo or Seoul than it does in Paris or Stockholm or Munich or Vienna or anything like that. But they actually permit more. And they specifically permit replacement of old small buildings with new big ones. which is something that Europe is not very good at, and the United States is just fucking awful. And the upshot is that that bit of cyberpunk needs to happen in a way. This is by far the most important thing, way more than exact extent. I mean, LA has a big urban rail network. It's building an even bigger one. Yeah, we can talk about how they need to build this. This is called the subway to the sea. It's essentially continuing on Wilshire to, I believe the plan is to go to 4th. So that, I believe, is this one. Yeah, so this is called the subway to the sea. It's something, and just to understand how old this idea is, they're about to open phase 1 of this, which I believe is this section. So the first transit block I ever read was 2nd Avenue Sagas, which was very New York focused, starting 07. The second one, where you can even see things I wrote about construction costs in 2008 when I didn't really know. All I knew was that Tokyo was cheaper than New York, and it seemed puzzling to me. But okay, Tokyo's good at it, is what I thought. Already then, they were talking about the subway to the sea as an activist thing to build Wilshire not just to UCLA, but all the way to Santa Monica. And at the time, I didn't even know what they were talking about, and for a while I thought that they meant Geary, because that would also go to the Pacific, and not LA. So anyway, this is something that needs to happen. We're going to save right now and call it Subway to the Sea. And it has 9, and I'm going to call it Wilshire Subway. But actually I'm going to call it by a different name, Wilshire Whittier. And we're going to give them the historic colors, all the lines. And let's make it a little thicker. 5 might be too thick, let's do 3. Okay. This is the purple line. I'm not depicting stations because I don't remember them, and it's not that important. The line is much more important. And again, it's important to build to Santa Monica. It's more important to do TOD. And LA is bad at TOD, is by far the most important takeaway from this. LA is a very NIMBY place. And I don't just mean it in the sense that California is NIMBY, although it is. I mean LA specifically is NIMBYer than San Diego and San Francisco. You can I could speculate on why, but that's less important than observing that this is the case. Now, bear in mind, the line terminates at Union Station and doesn't go east. East of Union Station, and I'm actually going to produce the system mostly as is for now. So I'm going to start with the red line now. Now, the red line starts here, and I'm portraying this line as going straight in Wilshire, but it doesn't. Maybe I should actually edit to make it more correct. You see the M is not exactly centered. The reason is that the line, so there's this curve. I'm thinking maybe even that is a little gash left by construction. I'm not sure, but the point is that this curves toward Vermont. It's not an abrupt turn, and so the station on both the red and the purple is on the curve. The way the purple works, or I guess at this point they've renamed it to I guess line. They've renamed it to line D. Is that the purple works like this, which is nice because it means that this is a transfer. This is a cross-platform transfer. I mean, it might even be same platform. I don't remember, but it's something that if South Vermont is built and preview of Crayon, it should be built. Then this would be a cross-platform, not a crossing transfer, and this is a good thing. Not only is it a cross-platform transfer, but also the most important direction, which is Hollywood to downtown, is the cross-platform one, not the change direction. So let's do the red line now. Now the red line, as is, starts here, and and now it doesn't go straight north, because if you go straight north, you hit Griffith Observatory, which is a nice place to serve, don't get me wrong, but Hollywood's more important, Titan and so on. And yeah, you build this, and by build I mean this was already done in the 90s. They drilled a tunnel underneath the hills, which took some work to get right because of earthquakes. But the costs, even by that era standards, were not insane. And of course, by today's standards, they're amazing. So I believe the North Hollywood stop is not where it is. It's here. Yeah, that's where you hit the orange line. So this is the red line, not including the section where it's interlined with the purple. And I'm sorry for using the colors that I'm used to and not the new names. Now, there have been proposals to extend the line north to serve Burbank, but not just any Burbank Airport. Now, I believe that this is not actually in any of the measures, which means that the measures that are funding everything through through either 2056 or 2060, I'm forgetting which, don't include this. This is what I believe. Please, LA people, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Yeah. So the point is that this probably should be extended north, but not to the airport. There's actually something a little bit annoying about these airport extensions, which is that they do encourage people to fly. So here's something that I think I learned in Wikipedia. So you can just Google Wikipedia KTX, which is that the ridership on the high-speed trains in Korea dipped so the trains open, I believe, 2003, and ridership has steadily increased since due to development, due to the opening of new parts of the system, so new branches. The first line was built French style, so only part of the way. It was only built high speed from Seoul to Daegu, and then they years later extended the high speed line from Daegu to Busan. Previously, trains went on the slow line from Daegu to Busan, again French style, so through service, not transfer. It's a standard gauge country, Korea, and so, or rather, it's 2/3 of a standard gauge country, South Korea. And again, more branches and again, more development, more urbanization. Ridership has grown steadily, but there was 1 year in which it was a one-time dip, and that year was, I believe, 2009, which was or either 2008 or 2009, and that was timed for when Line 9 of the Seoul subway opened to Gimpo, because it made it easier to access the domestic airport. And at the time, the trains from Seoul to Busan did the trip in, I think, 4 hours something, 4 hours 20, at which point people still fly. And so, sorry, I shouldn't say people still fly. At 4:20, most people take the train. This was also seen in, so you can see this in I think I show the data, I showed the data set for Japan a couple of videos ago when I was talking about high-speed rail modeling. I have a blog post about this. Sanity check. This one. More sanity checks on the high-speed rail model. That has a link to trips between pairs of prefectures in Japan by any mode except driving your own car, so or carpooling, so buses, ferries, planes, private trains, JR trains. So the model split generally is more than the majority of the aerial market is rail, not air, but there is still an air market at 4 hours. And so making it easier to fly actually did lead to some adverse model shift during the 1 year that the thing opened. And this means that if this is done, first of all, the thing is, this kind of cuts through. This is important because it means that it has to be deep bored, and the stations might not be very easy to build. But also importantly, there really isn't anything here except the airport. So it's only for airport traffic. And importantly, this is Burbank, not LAX. We're going to get to that later because I think it is useful to serve LAX. However, if you serve Burbank and not LAX, Burbank's traffic, and this is as of when I was blogging this, which was 10 years ago, but I don't think it's changed that much. At the time, 63% of the people who were flying into or out of Burbank, origin and destination, not connecting, were doing so to a city that is, I'm forgetting whether 63% is just cities in California that would be connected to high-speed rail on the full multi-phase plan that has a branch to Sacramento, or whether it's these plus also Vegas and Phoenix. But at any rate, the point is that this is essentially extra amount of money that does nothing except compete with the state's high-speed rail plan. Don't do that. Just don't. To the contrary, plan maybe even redeveloping it, like closing and redeveloping this airport as housing. And yeah, then the red line would be okay, but there are commuter lines here. And you should use that. We're going to get to commuter rail in a bit. So with going north on the red line, there is a case to just not changing anything. No, there is a case for changing, but the thing is, we need to do on the map tourism a little bit, and the reason is that the valley. This is so. Actually, let me something. I'm gonna hit save and write red line or Vermont line. So something important about how I like drawing crayon is that I like giving the lines names and both names and colors. So name like in London or in Tokyo, and also a consistent color. So there's a line on the London Underground that is always colored black. This line is never referred to as the black line. It's called the Northern Line. And it's the same with what I do. And the reason specifically is that when I crayon, I'm saying what people should build. Usually the numbering implies phasing, and I don't look at that as closely, or even when I do, I don't look at the phasing of this line gets built before that line. And so numbering would be a little weird. But also colors are a little bit weird because branding. So I usually just give the lines names, as in, because I don't want to say things like they should build line 6 but not line 8, because that's weird. Or they should build the green line but not the purple line. Unless these are lines that are actually planned to the point that the green line means something specific and the purple line means something specific. I don't like referring to them this way, but when I say things like on my map, I'm portraying a line to this place or not to that place, that should be built ahead of that one. This is something that I think is more, I don't know what the correct word for this is. Neutral, maybe, is better? Is the best way to describe it? So anyway, we need to do a little bit of tourism, a little bit of, not tourism, on the map tourism, to figure out where we want to hit the valley. Now, I believe this is it's mostly going to be, it's going to tell us to hit Burbank, which is here, and is not going to be served by this subway, at least. Orange line, yeah, sure. But, and commuter rail. But, so let's go with Burbank, and where do we want to go then? Yes, it's also, yeah, there's also, the northern line is also 2 lines. And yes, the interchange needs more capacity and more accessibility, and I believe that there are long-term plans to do so, but long-term, I mean, like, in Germany, there are plans to do things that proceed at roughly the pace of a German train, by which I mean, by which I mean something that should be 2.5 hours is scheduled to take 4.5 and actually takes 7, like Berlin to Munich trains. And same thing with the pace at which Germany sends weapons to Ukraine, for example. And I believe Britain is the same. Not with the pace of sending things to Ukraine. Britain is very good at sending the little it has to Ukraine and then buying from other people and then saying that it sent things to Ukraine that are actually stuff that Poland would have sent on its own or something. And yeah, and so in Britain things just happen in like the pace of a British train, which is the same as the pace of a German train, is the point. Yeah, Camden, I mean that's not because, I don't think it's because Camden is run by landlords. My understanding is that it isn't, like, maybe I'm wrong and there is NIMBYism about this, but I thought that the reason it's not happening is just because the plans are rather like German infrastructure plans, or like high speed too. Yeah, it's gonna happen, just, it's not that we're already boomers. I mean, Zoomers, and I don't mean the older Zoomers, I mean the younger Zoomers are going to be boomers by now. It's like how in London they build lines so silly that they can just name them after the monarchs, because by the time Crossrail 2 actually opens, it's going to be the Charles line, and then Crossrail 3 is going to be the William line, and Crossrail 4 is going to be the George line or something. but anyway, you want to make sure that Burbank is visible on this because Burbank is. This is annoyingly not very clear, but if we assume that this is, see this little outline, do we think it's this one? Because if so, we can just carve a line through here. We're gonna neck here because I don't wanna, because Glendale I think is actually a serious secondary business district and I don't want to blind my analysis. There's stuff here. It is pure white flight suburbia. It might not be white anymore at this point. Like LA is very diverse to the point that the white flight suburbs are very often Asian or Hispanic, but they still are very NIMBY, and usually also the NIMBY elite there is the people who moved there earlier, and these people are more likely to be white people. Okay, now we're already here. Now we just carve up something around this. It's not terribly important. This is, wait, this lake, what did I just know? This lake is, which one is this? I'm worried I'm confusing it. No, okay, so this is this built up area. So this lake, is it this? That, okay. This is portrayed as a lake on the map. Maybe it is a lake, maybe, I don't even know. But okay, you go around, and then this is just gonna be the backside of the hills. So confirm, perform analysis on the blob, and we're gonna see where the jobs are. And we're gonna do 2019 because I don't want to deal with Corona artifacts. Maybe it was like, I honestly have no idea. I will say that the Greens in Germany at the national level are not that insane, by which I mean Robert Habeck is bad, but I mean, yeah, it's probably worse than Olaf Scholz at this point, but not by much, and Baerbock is amazing. Yeah, the Greens don't really the National Greens don't really have ideas about public transport. They are in favor of it vaguely, whereas the French Greens have very concrete ideas about public transport at the national level, which is slow down all the TGVs to 200 kilometers an hour because higher speed is evil. Now, the British Greens are an entirely different can of worms. They're essentially a spoiler party at this point. They're like maybe the UKIP of the early 2000s, if maybe. So they're a party that's like maybe less irrelevant to the American Greens, but they're not the German Greens or even the French Greens, which are, you know, an important part of the French center left. And so when you have people who are who don't think they'll ever be in government, yeah, of course they're going to do. Of course they're going to do this kind of shit. Alhambra subdivision. Okay. Yeah. No. London the fact that London has row houses. Never mind Camden. I mean, Hammersmith. Hammersmith has these row houses, and that place needs a lot more density and has a lot of capacity for a lot of density. Yeah, so anyway, so here, very clearly, investments in high-speed rail here are driven by SPD or by bureaucrats, most of it bureaucrats. But it's not something that the Greens are against. They just don't care. The Berlin Greens, yeah, they're against subways. And then they're wondering why they lost an election to someone who had to resign a federal ministry in scandal. If they ever name Thameslink after a monarch, who would they name it after? I mean, I guess they could. I mean, if Crossrail is the Elizabeth line, maybe this could be the George line, but I mean, I imagine the George line is going to be George the 7th, not George the 6th. Yeah, okay, but Brighton, okay, but it's a British count, but it's Brighton, okay? Like, I mean, in Britain, this is, it's not, I don't think it's that important who Brighton elects as a council for important things, whereas it actually matters who the mayor of Berlin is, what the Berlin coalition is. Like, Germany is way more empowerment at that level than the UK does, except, well, Scotland, of course, Wales, and London. Yeah, George VI, right, but my point is that I'm guessing that course rule 4 is going to be George, because George VII. But anyway, so let's look at what the analysis is. Okay, so we see Burbank. Burbank is visible. Ventura is absolutely a thing. This looks like Universal City, maybe? And it's entirely possible that nothing else. Okay, this is something. I will let this load. My computer needs time to think. Okay, a few more things here, but this is essentially just random intersections. And what is this? Is this the end of the Orange Line or something? Like the Warner Center or something? This is... Okay, I'm not gonna... Okay, it's gonna take me too long to actually wait for this to load. I'm just gonna remember the shape of it. I'm just gonna memorize the shape of this. So... So the Ventura Freeway at this point, and then, yeah, this is the Warner Center. Yeah, the Warner Center is where the Orange Line goes. So the point is that this is actually a problem in the valley that this is worth addressing right now when we start granting things there. The valley does not have natural corridors. The valley has Ventura to some extent. It has the Warner Center, and mostly it has Burbank. Burbank is on commuter. Now this is important because it means that the valley is tabula rasa. If you do not have good TOD plans, this is where it ends. You don't build more in the valley. Again, I mean, I guess you turn the Orange Line to a light rail, but you don't build more in the valley. And then if you do have TOD plans, then I mean, you can choose where the TOD goes, so you can choose this based on some kind of network coherence. So, I don't know, let's say the red line, you build things and the red line turns out to have a lot of spare capacity, then you extend the red line into a TOD there. So it's much more of a shape model than a serve model. This is really important about the valley. Certainly, maybe, certainly actually this could be a TOD plan. That is to say, if high-speed rail actually opens, and they can close Burbank Airport, then this actually is a good TOD site, because it's a site that does not have legacy residences with NIMBYs that will oppose change. This is also something this is actually a very European thing. Berlin has these plans for Tegel with the Urban Tech Republic. Stockholm, in Stockholm actually the Greens had plans to do this with Bromma, to build more, the Greens had plans to build more housing through closing the airport. And instead the airport was not closed, but housing was built elsewhere. So kind of like the green NIMBYism, the sort of green NIMBYism mentality in this part of the world is usually that, okay, yeah, you should build more housing, but never by replacing things that they care about as parks, or older residential buildings. But if they can find some deceased factory, it's not like a green has ever worked in a factory, or an airport or something like that, then yeah. So anyway, let's leave this here for now, because we're starting to populate the system as is first before we go on. Now the regional connectors opening right now, and I'm going to declare, based on coloring, that there's no such thing as the gold line anymore. The Expo line, and we're just going to call them blue line and Expo line. And expect that people understand that some of this was the eastern branches we used to be interlined as a Sealy-shaped blue gold line. So this is a streetcar loop, which we're going to. Let's not keep this actually. Let's say. So here's another thing that I think you should keep in mind whenever you do LA Crayon. In the long run, these should not ever run in the street. So probably where the blue line terminates, which is on the street here in the loop, this should probably not be the way that it works in the long run. So instead, let's have it terminate around here. So this is a reimagined blue line slightly, which just terminates as like an it's like a concrete viaduct, elevated over Long Beach Boulevard. This is something that they have in Vancouver at this scale. This is something that, okay, I haven't done enough that it matters whether I kill it. This is 38-ish meters building to building. That's pretty wide. I mean, there's already a median. The median does not look especially wooded. I mean, yeah, there's some trees, but a lot of it is just not. Yeah, just take this and turn it into a viaduct that then holds up to concrete tracks, and you do it. And if you do it that way, this kind of Y viaducts, they don't actually. These Y viaducts don't actually lead to much of an echo. Whereas the point is that I shouldn't say old because Berlins are older and not that noisy, but traditional American steel Ls are boomboxes. Like there's so much stuff echoing from the way that they're built that they're incredibly noisy. And this way, Ls built in New York City in, let's say, the 1910s and 20s, like in Queens, the Flushing line, the Astoria line, the 7th and W, you cannot have a conversation while a train is passing. And in Berlin, Ls built in the 1900s, they're not concrete, they're a mix. They're noisy, but they're less noisy. And pure concrete is quieter, actually. So this is something where there is actually a solution. It's a solution that does require dealing with NIMBYs, because the NIMBYs won't believe it until they see it. And even then they will complain and try to extract surplus. It's just something where there might just not be enough surplus. So this is the blue line, right? Or did I accidentally transition to... Okay, I'm confusing myself. Did I accidentally transition from the blue line to the freight line? Yeah, it looks like it did. So blue line is not here. Blue line is this one. Right? Yeah, don't do a street. I'm gonna get to Alhambra, I promise. Yeah, it's gonna be the Expo line, and then it's gonna be colored gold. Yeah, okay. Yeah, or the 3 train in Brooklyn, same thing. So, no, that's the river. I'm really confused about where the line goes right now. Although it does look, based on the fact that it's elevated, that it is the blue line. Yeah, and this runs in the street, and this is landscaped. Yeah, this is the blue line. Sorry. Let's go up to here. Yeah, and station. And again, we're not depicting stations on this crayon. And I guess we go north. Not all the way, right? Because because here, the problem is parts of this, and I don't remember which part, are in streetcar mode, and it's really annoying because these are the slower parts. Like the point of doing a Stadtbahn is that I believe the original connector goes like this, and now we're back to the C. Now, bear in mind there's also a question of, do you go this way, or do you instead connect the blue, which is the plan to do kind of north, south, and east, west. One of my followers on one of my readers on my blog proposed doing it the other way. So instead of Long Beach to Pasadena, the way I'm drawing it, and what I'm soon going to draw, which is Santa Monica to East LA, they should do Long Beach to East LA and Santa Monica to Pasadena. Honestly, you should do it based on, I mean, ideally the kind of north-south and east-west coherence should be how you should do it. And as at least as a tiebreaker if there's no other overarching concern, but there might be one. It might be that these lines. So if two lines are substantially busier than the other, then you might want to do that. But of course, these share tracks, so it's a little bit problematic to do uneven frequencies. But if the way it works is that the same frequency but the train lengths are different, then absolutely you can match them in the kinked way. But anyway, okay, so this, and I don't actually know how far the foothills extension goes. The correct way to do it is only do what you've started building, or maybe full designing, because this is a bad line. Foothills. It's just a bad line. It's a line that's mostly being built because they needed to bribe local communities here to get them to vote for transit measures. This is, I mean, for 15 years I've been saying, okay, I'm not actually a native speaker of German. For 15 years I've been saying that this is kind of weird, and essentially going back 15 years, the answer by supporters has always been the same. It has a lot of support. It's not about cost effectiveness. It's about the fact that people here want it, and at some point the transit builders stopped caring about cost effectiveness, and it's just about where they're not going to get yelled at. Which, I mean, I get the concern, but I mean, at some point, you're the planner, they're randos. It's okay. I mean, and they believe this line's supposed to go even past Azusa. I believe this is still where they're planning to build, and they didn't randomly colonize a commuter main. And yeah, this is planned to. This is supposed to run as a single line. To Pomona. I believe that's how it's supposed. It's the plan. No, it's entirely possible. Yeah, I think I accidentally colonized the commuter line or a freight line. Oh, Montclair. Okay, so I need to go as far as Montclair. Not Clermont, Montclair. Okay. Okay, it's a little bit less drunk, and by a little bit less drunk, I mean you're just building less of it. Where's Montclair? Yeah, this is why I should. This is why I was always reticent to Crown LA. There are parts of it that I understand pretty well, but if you're asking me where Montclair is, I'm going to need to. Like it's not like I don't understand the structure of it very well. Oh, this is Montclair. Right. So, wait, is the line actually going to go all the way to here? Like how? Is this supposed to be the right of way? Because that's kind of stupid. Yeah, and note this is an almost 100 kilometer line. Yeah, okay. So let's save and call this the Foothills Long Beach line. And of course it gets the blue color. The blue color, when I crayon, I don't try to get the colors right, I just do I just do the most saturated, like the simplest version of blue, and not trying to get to the correct level of saturation for readability. Certainly not running on Google Earth, which is not at all a complete product. Okay, now the Expo line is this one. So the Expo line, so there are a bunch of lines in LA that are inherited from Pacific Electric lines, where the line, of course, it has the line, of course, is long dismantled, but the right of way is sometimes intact, or sufficiently intact that it's not that much new construction. And this is the Expo line. So the Expo line is not the best way to get to the west side. The best way to get to the west side is Wilshire. But Wilshire only became what it is today after car culture. So it's something that I think was being developed in the 20s and 30s, at which point Pacific Electric still existed, but it was a Hulk that was basically a loss leader for property development, and the property development was not. The property development was for sale, so there was no real reason to keep the money-losing lines, i.e., all the lines in operation. So this is the. So what I'm creating right now. So Expo is up until here because blue is from the 80s and Expo is from the 10s. So Expo. So historically, it's blue from the southern intersection or western intersection with red purple down to Long Beach. This was the first line built in LA. This is I think when blue, green, not green, green in the freeway median, which is exactly as bad as you would think. Red, purple, orange is bus and trail solid. Gold, which is which at the time was this up to the northern intersection from Pasadena. Then Expo, now regional connector announced revealed, and Gold meanwhile was also acquired this branch called Gold Line East Side, which I believe goes up until here. And I think there's an east, and I'm actually going to check this right now because there's supposed to be an extension. Gold Line. Yeah, these are really, LA is so sprawly and these lines, and the thing about LA is the lines have very wide extent, just not a lot of density in the core. So there aren't that many lines. So you look at a large metro system, or metro light rail system, and the lines in the core, there's a jumble, there's an entire jumble of them, like they cross many times. Often there's also crossings without transfers because something always comes up. Mexico City being the exception because it only has 3 lines in the center. And it's just really weird. LA doesn't have that. Just doesn't have a lot of mass in the center, but the lines continue very far away. Yeah, performance. Yeah, like the ridership is not really there. Yeah, no, there are commuter. I mean, the S-Bahn does not have lines that are this long. The S-Bahn mostly is 20 to 30 kilometers outside Friedrichstraße in each direction. I think Straßberg Nord is 40. And I think that's the farthest extent of the Berlin S-Bahn. 40, 45, 50 maybe. And so, yeah, okay, one of them, and this is a 100 kilometer line. Okay, it's a two-tailed one, but okay, so this is a light rail line. It's about 100 kilometers. And I think in Berlin, the longest might be about 70. And that's commuter rail in Berlin. So here it goes as far as Atlantic. Okay, East Side Transit. It's called East Side Transit Corridor, and it's so under construction that I am bound to include it. So this is Atlantic, which is this one, I believe. Atlantic Whittier. No, it's not this guy. And then, are you actually not? You're not serving Garfield or something? So, where are they going? It's unclear. Yeah, we're gonna talk about an S-Bahn as soon as I'm finished drawing the current lines. This is important, and I am glad that you are previewing this because it means I'm not gonna yell into the ether. Okay, Commerce Citadel, Atlantic. It's this one, Atlantic. So the idea is, so their plan is to do this. Okay. No, this is Atlantic. Okay. So this, and then what? They're going to go on Whittier or what? Or Washington? Oh, Washington Boulevard Alternative. Yeah, okay. Commerce Citadel. Where's Commerce and Citadel? Where's Commerce and Citadel? It's nice to give these intersections, but beyond the central and western core, it's not actually a grid, so the intersections don't help me very much. Where is Commerce Okay, Greenwood and Montebello here or something? Washington. Where's Washington? This is Olympic. You're not going to build here, are you? Okay. I'm very confused. SR60 and Washington. Okay. And I apologize for struggling with this on screen. I mean, I will say that it's really important to do something on Whittier, to the point that I would keep crayoning subways on Whittier that connect to Wilshire, just because of the. Remember, half of the Wilshire buses. So half the Wilshire buses only go from from downtown LA to the west. The other half, I say, I don't think they actually serve the Union Station. The other half continue east, and that route is Whittier. And it was actually a bad idea when they built the Gold Line, the East Side Gold Line, not on Whittier, not on Whittier, but on First and Third. This was just bad planning. I think Jarrett Walker was trying to justify it with on grounds like this is more redevelopable or something. Then you look at how much TOD LA does and what redevelopment. Beverly, which one of Whittier can work? Yeah, Whittier can work with an extension. That's fine. It's just that Washington Boulevard, and then I need to check Citadel outlets. This is along the Santa Freeway, and this is in Commerce. And the nice thing is that this overlay actually tells me where. Okay, so are you trying to do the? Oh God, it's like Commerce and Citadel. Okay, I see what they're doing. This is just stupid. So the plan is to build this. This is so circuitous. And how far are you gonna get, or is the plan to go? So you go to Montebello, Pico Rivera, and Whittier. Okay, and Whittier. This, maybe? Norwalk and Lambert. Please tell me that these are street names. Norwalk. I guess this would be Lambert, or this. Sorensen. Mines. Oh, Lambert. That's fine. But no, by the way, this is some massively long interstation on a line that is not especially fast. Like, remember, the plan is Norwalk and Lambert. So Norwalk, Lambert. This is a line that's going to run probably on the street. But even if not, this is 2.5 kilometers. Just insane. Like, I mean, Berlin would have on the U-Bahn, two stations. Two intermediate stations. So three segments between stations, and what LA wants to interconnect. It's just weird. And if you're wondering if it's about speed, this is not speed. This is kind of shit. So you were asking me to shit on LA plans. Here's a shitty LA plan. So 4 lines, of which 2 share tracks, which we're going to get to in a bit about that problem. And then there's the green line. And the green line, as is drunk as all fuck. So the origin story of the green. So the blue line was built because of the light rail revolution in the 1980s. One of the people who got it built, in fact, was a transport planner, which, if you're familiar, it was a transport planner named Wendell Cox. If you're familiar with 2000s era, early 2010s American transit discord, you know who Wendell Cox is. He is possibly the most anti-transit pundit in the United States is specialized in being against public transit. Even more so, I would say, than Randall O'Toole. He has a website called Demographia, which is a compilation of urban areas and so on. He keeps arguing that like everyone evolves naturally toward the perfect characteristic of being auto-oriented. He's just a thing. Essentially, think of him as a think tank hack, who I believe gets his money from like grants from like highway lobbyists or something. But anyway, his origin story, he was involved in creating the Blue Line. The Blue Line was the scope of the Blue Line increased. I would not say crept, but increased from a single track to a double track line, leading to a cost increase. Now this was the 1980s. Cost increases were a shock to everyone, and so the cost increases on the Blue Line again, because it just became better, shocked him into being an early warner against cost increases on urban rail lines. Now there was actual real research on this by Don Pickrell in America, and then this and a bunch of others turned into Ben Flugberg. But again, Ben Flugberg is, I think, late 90s, early 2000s. This is something that happened 20 years before, and people weren't aware of this phenomenon yet. And meanwhile, Wendell Cox keeps taking that experience as a reason to just dump on all public transit, including the funniest thing is that origin story, the Blue Line, was built very cost effectively. I believe I want to say 2010-ish dollars, 2010-ish ridership. It was about $10,000 per weekday rider, which is very good. In the 80s it was not amazing. Today it's amazing. In the 1980s it was pretty good. But anyway, the gold color is hard to say and I know, and I'm sorry. This is why I try to make these wider, so the gold is more prominent. But anyway, so the green line. So the origin story of the the line is the first one. The origin story of the green line is, they had these old plans. So the old plan was the first plan was 2 east-west lines, 1 north-south. East-west would be this, what became the purple and the east side gold, as a single line. I think Wilshire Whittier or something. Maybe this is a branch. And another more southerly line to LAX around here, and then north-south is Pasadena to Long Beach. So blue line, gold line, now blue line, gold line, to a second north-south, to a second east-west, coming from using not the best corridor for this, but the available one for the Expo line, while the Wilshire subway is built much more slowly and expensively, and sadly it's not being the one that's being thrown to the west, even though the jobs are here and here, not so much here. And the second east-west, and I don't mean the second east-west, I mean the original plan, second east-west was around here, and essentially, this is called the Century Freeway, and this is the last entirely new freeway built in LA. Ever since then, this was the early 90s, the only freeways that LA has built are new lanes on existing lines. Maybe there was some kind of bypass or something, but certainly no new full freeway, nor any, I believe, freeway tunnel. Berlin, for example, has built a freeway tunnel since, underneath the zoo, like west of the new city center, east of the old West Berlin city center. And of course, for example, Stockholm is building freeway tunnels and has built freeway tunnels. I have a video about this. The United States, for a motorhead country that thinks that its wealth is measured in the size of its SUVs, the United States doesn't actually build a lot of good urban freeway infrastructure that drivers think well of. The roads are very poorly maintained. The quality of the roads is notably worse than in, let's say, Italy. And there's no freeway tunnel, or almost no freeway tunneling. There's the Big Dig, and the Big Dig it would not happen again. And when they tried to do it again in Seattle, the same things that happened with the Big Dig happened. That is to say, the costs were insane, like multiple billions per kilometer insane. And so they stopped. And I mean, what do you mean they stopped? They built this, but nobody else wants to do this. And LA, they had plans to, I think, tunnel the 610, and they're due to cost. So this is the Green Line. The Green Line connects Norwalk with LAX. And the way I'm drawing it, and I do apologize for possibly missing the exact other terminus, which is this one, or maybe or does it go a little farther south? Let's start this here and maybe draw an extension later, and let's call it the Century Line right now, because colors are not, because all lines get names and colors. You might notice something about this line. This I should not call it path measure. This I should call expo line. Is that the green line? You might be able to tell doesn't actually go to either Norwalk or LAX. Yeah, they didn't build single track because I mean they want to do so. Bear in mind, in the 70s, the first generation American and Canadian light rail lines did a lot of clever shit to reduce costs. And essentially, once it's like the first TGV line, like so Martha, you've read my blog. You know what I'm saying about this. Other people, you might not have caught this, but the lowest cost per kilometer high-speed line ever built is the first one in Europe. So Paris to Lyon, the Shinkansen line was expensive from the start, and they did a lot of really clever things to minimize costs. Some of which have persisted, some of which have not. French costs on high-speed rail until very recently remained pretty low. Spanish costs kind of very low, imitating a lot of French things and doing better. But again, never as good as at the beginning. And the reasons at the beginning, they were financially constrained. They weren't sure this would succeed. This was a lot of clever cost-cutting ideas came from that. And by the time and then they succeeded, and they got a little lazy, and I should say they got a little lazy. I mean, like the lines that were built in the 90s and early 2000s or in the 2000s in France were like $25 million a kilometer in today's money. That's not bad. And so the lines, but Paris to Lyon was subtime. And it's the same thing with the first generation light rail lines in the United States and Canada. Remember, same people. Often they moved between the two countries. There were American and Canadian vets. So Calgary and Edmonton really are part of the same tradition on this as Denver. Actually, Denver might be a little more recent. But Portland, San Diego, but the earliest American light rail lines. So Portland, San Diego, I think Sacramento. Actually, maybe Pittsburgh, so not Western, not just Western. But the big early ones were Portland and San Diego. So there was a lot of very clever cost cutting. Like in San Diego, they actually went on a freight line, and I don't mean right of way of a freight line. I mean there's a line that I believe is the only place in the United States where an urban rail system that is not legally commuter rail shares track with freight. It's a short section. There's like it's not a freight main line. It's I think a branch. It might even be a short line. It's not even a branch line. And it's maybe a freight run every week, which is how the FRA let them do it. But they do actually do that. So a lot of little clever things, like maybe leaving a little section single track. For the blue line, I guess they couldn't get a good terminal in Long Beach, so they looped it. But yeah, single track is way too stupid. Yeah, exactly. If you can't fail, you won't succeed. And so... And because I talk about construction costs, and I want to pause the topic of the video for a moment and talk a bit about this cost cutting, because it matters how the cost cutting is done. So you can do cost cutting in that way, which is a bunch of engineers and planners figuring out clever little things. Now I say engineers and planners, but it's something that can be done with enthusiasts. So the transit matters. Okay, now you can see all the... Okay, so this is the document that we're talking about. Look for it. So either check Fedi, I have a link, or go or check or Google Transit Matters. And I may have told you that I'm back on that Slack. I managed to make Slack work on my computer, so I certainly should not be clicking Slack links. And so I imagine there's a link here. This is the actual document. It's listing a bunch of names of people who work on it. In this case, you can actually figure out what my contribution is, because my contribution is a section called Getting Regional Rail Right, which is essentially a summary of TCP, of the TCP report, including dumping on design build. It's something that if you've read the reports very deeply, or very frequently, okay, this is can't get it here. Then okay, so this is a better link. Yeah. Okay. Then then it won't tell you much you haven't heard before. But let me see. Okay, so this is okay. They're citing my blog post on this because. But anyway, there is someone that I've been working on these reports with, and I say someone. I think 15 people contributed to this report. And it's just. I'm gonna do it this way because the download speed is so bad that I can't. That if I don't download it, then what the fuck is this speed? 9 kilobytes per second. I mean, I'm streaming video. I'm streaming video. What the hell are you guys doing? Okay, I have no idea why the speed is vintage 2001, but the point is that again, there's this person. There's one of the people that work with this is someone who's again is enthusiast. I don't think ever has gotten paid for this except pocket change for like one transit matter thing. His name is Jay Flynn, and yeah, he's one of these and again, even though he's not a professional and he's a rail fan, I've seen this kind of really clever things from him in TM meetings about the regional rail project, about this section you can leave single track, and this way you can have one track freight, one track passengers, and you will not ever have to deal with annoying freight railroads. And this being Massachusetts, the freight railroads are only a handful of trains a day. This is not LA, but they're still annoying. I mean, because it's only a couple trains per day, it's also a very unmodernized line. Things like that. So when you can cost cut through that kind of through these kinds of clever trick where technically you don't need to do this, you can use that. These are very cool ideas. The Vancouver SkyTrain actually was not light rail. They kind of where everyone else did light rail, Vancouver tried to be clever and do a vendor locked driverless metro, and somehow that they made it actually work. And one of the clever tricks that they did to cut costs is that in downtown Vancouver, they repurposed a disused freight rail tunnel, which is why the route looks a little weird. But they made it work. The Expo line, not the LA one, the Vancouver one was very cheap. Subsequent ones have been more expensive, but still, I think lowest cost in North America. So when you are that clever, you will actually get things done. But instead, if the cost cutting comes from some heavyweight politician who just says, cut the cost, or you don't need to build as much, or here is or I believe in 80% solutions, 20% of the cost gets you 80% of the benefits, that never works. It's a railway. You bring in someone who doesn't understand urban transit, you're not going to get that. You're going to get 80% of the cost and 20% of the benefits instead. So that would be the single track kind. And maybe Cox pushed for it and that didn't, and it was rejected. I don't know. Now my download speed goes up to 2003, 2004. Yeah, hold on, I'm kidding. 2004, I was already downloading things at 200. But anyway, so you can be clever, or you can be a corporate trader who thinks that having successfully stripped a hulk of a firm for parts makes them good at actually running a firm day to day. And when that person has opinions, they always suck. And that's, I think, a general fact. I think Chainsaw Al was a trope namer. And so the point is, so let's go back to the green line. So the green line essentially exists as mitigation for the fairway, because the reason this is the last fairway LA built is this is built 80s, early 90s, so by then full bloom of freeway revolters who knew how to sue the government and extract concessions. They extracted so many concessions to make sure it would never be built again. And one of the concessions was the green line in the median. Now the green line is supposed to connect Norwalk, this is Norwalk, with LAX. This is LAX. Now you might be wondering whether this is some terminal. No, there are shuttle buses from here to LAX. Now, now if you're wondering what happens when there is a when you have a train to a shuttle bus to the airport, this is the mode of transportation that you can expect people to take to the airport. Now this is a very lightweight vehicle. What are they saying the curb weight is? Let's do the modern one. Of course it would be 1 per. So this is a very lightweight thing. Are you just not saying what the weight is? Really? But I imagine this is about 1.7 tons, which is very light. A bus is about 12. A train, per let's say 25-meter light rail vehicle, is probably about 40. So this is a very lightweight mode. So it has very high power to weight ratio. Again, I believe it is 1 point. So I believe it is 1.7 tons. So like so the power to weight ratio is way better than anything you can even see on like very souped up high-speed trains. Made a good Japanese technology. There's only one problem with this very successful mode of transportation. Let's face it. It only carries one person at a time usually. That's what happens when you tell people to take a shuttle bus. And so the upshot is that this needs to change. Now, how does this change? Well, and the other end also. This is a Norwalk stop, but the Norwalk stop is a park and ride here. Norwalk, the actual place, is here. There's literally a Norwalk commuter rail station where there have been, I don't know if it's still active, but there have been plans to put a high-speed rail station there because it's between LA and Anaheim, and plans still to throw on the high-speed trains to Anaheim, whether on dedicated track or share track is up in the air. It's basically vaporware anyway at this point. Now vaporware can be made. I don't know how old everyone else is. I know roughly Martha and Borners, and in our generation, do you guys remember Duke Nukem Forever? How Duke Nukem Forever took so many years to make that there were multiple "these things have happened since Duke Nukem Forever was announced" lists, and then the game, of course, was vintage mid-90s, so it sucked. Or if you want StarCraft 2, which took 13 years to make, 12 years to make, and 98 to 10, and unlike Duke Nukem Forever, it did not suck, and it's still the standard by which all RTSs are judged. But things that stay in development hell forever do sometimes get built. Like, that's fine. Yeah, so as I said, Jay Flynn was one of the people who worked on this, and again, how many is this? 16 people. Yeah, so this needs to be withdrawn is the point. It's silly that they don't. So in the same way that we happily pretended that the subway to the sea is a thing, let's go in and just right now start with the most obvious fucking thing here, which is find the Norwalk commuter rail station, which is going to take me a while because why would I know where the Norwalk commuter rail station is? Is it here? Is it this one? Yeah, and Norwalk CA because there's another Norwalk commuter rail station. And no, not this one. Not no. I don't want the shitty light rail station. I want the commuter rail station. Idiots. Norwalk Metrolink. Norwalk Station Metrolink. No, this is not Metrolink. Metrolink is the commuter trains. The commuter trains. I hate this so much. Yeah, this is a lot less. If you're wondering, by the way, if you've seen me cry on Berlin and New York, and if you're wondering why I swear a lot more, this is because I know New York just so much better. Norwalk Santa Fe Springs. It is at 12700 Imperial Highway. This is the Norwalk station, not this one. This one is the Norwalk station. What are the coordinates? 1180337. So here. 0337. So here. Then 33, 54, 58. Okay, so the coordinates that they're giving me do not actually make for a station. Because it's this station and I kept not understanding. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you're right. This is just I think this is the West Santa Ana line that they're planning on doing. Yeah, okay. Now I understand where I screwed up. Okay. When I know where I screwed up, things are so much easier. And by the way, if you're wondering why I'm not doing mouse drag, this is why I'm not doing mouse drag. This is the problem when you do a mouse drag with the delay tool. No delay with the wait, what am I talking about? With the path tool. So you do this, and then you either go in Studebaker like this, or you figure that you can just carve right away through the residential buildings. So you do something like this. Yeah, so first of all you do this, because otherwise it's silly. Now at the other end, let's discuss the other end. And this is where the fact that and this is why one of the reasons I didn't care too much about this end. It's one of the issues that you can't easily break paths in this tool, in Google Earth. You can do it in Inkscape, but we're not Inkscaping today. And so the green line, what you should be doing with it is, so there are all these plans for a Sepulveda light rail line. I think they're actually happening as in funded. I've even briefly talked with the head of, maybe not the head, one of the important people at LA Metro, and by I've talked, I exchanged like 3 emails, and it was me and Eric doing the, I think Eric did more of the talking than me, about how they're doing, and they're trying to kind of be very innovative, which means being so turnkey that they're not even going to tell people build light rail that is compatible with their existing system. So all the vendors proposed like weird monorail type things or vendor locked. And if you do it right, so, and the point is, so Sepulveda looks like it's going to happen, and this is a really good opportunity because Sepulveda goes, so the point of Sepulveda is you're going north of here, so this means you're going to, instead of going, you're instead going to go like this, and meanwhile Crenshaw is being built. I need to depict Crenshaw. Crenshaw should not have been planned. Crenshaw is a bad idea. Crenshaw is, I believe, this. I'm forgetting the LIAX alignment. I believe the way Crenshaw is supposed to work is you start here. And it doesn't matter because we're going to have Crenshaw take over this bit anyway. So we're just going to trace over. So Crenshaw, current plan is, so Crenshaw is currently proposed, or not proposed, been built, might even, parts of it might even be in service, I'm not sure, it's a light rail line that at this point they ran out of all the usable good, of all the relatively easy, relatively high impact harder. So the relatively easy stuff that's left is stuff like West Santa Ana, which is kind of bullshit, or or it's things that involve a lot of new tunneling. So here, there's something called the harbor sub. This is something that should have been rebuilt as an S-Bahn line, but too late to some extent, unless they do a bunch of right-of-way widening, which might still be the right thing to do. So the point is to go via Crenshaw, and then from Crenshaw they're transitioning to the right-of-way, serving, well, Crenshaw, Inglewood, and then, and I'm forgetting how they're going to transition out of it to the point that I need to actually refresh my mind. Crenshaw line. And then they're going to hit LAX, possibly somewhat better than Aviation, which is way too far. The terminals are here. No cordials, do radials. Yeah. No. Okay, so the LAX Airport Expressway line has a very simple way of building it. Don't. It's actually really simple that way. Now there's how to go. Now there are these extension plans to go past the Expo line that try to go the wrong way. Like the correct thing to do is to go as close as possible to downtown LA, which is this version of this one. So we're actually going to start at at where the purple is today, which I think has been deprecated. I think at this point all the plans go this way, but that's just bad. And remember, Western is actually not a bad corridor to keep going to the north. And about being cordial, remember, LA does not have a strong center. To the extent that LA has a center, the center is so dispersed that it's actually okay to have connections to Koreatown instead. Like, this is not something, like, in this case, I think it's not necessarily a bad idea. Now, they should densify downtown LA, of course. And this is a big problem with LA. The downtown is so weak that they need to come up with these gimmicks. But there's a lot of stuff happening on the west side. Like, it's something that you can't pretend is not happening. This is wrong. This should be, I believe, like this. Yeah, that's the line. And the point is that none of these lines actually hit the airport. So they're not going to drag the line here above ground for some reason. For some reason, what they're planning on doing is this. Like connecting to the green line, and in practice what this means is, I'm going to trace over the green line because ultimately this is about breaking the green line into two. So it's like this, and you can even continue along along the Old Harbor sub, serving Torrance, which is not a terrible thing, just you maybe serve it some way that's less horrifically circuitous. I believe Crenshaw is always brown in the planning docs. So. And so when we do this, and then the green line, instead what it should be doing is again become the Sepulveda line, which means you break it around here. You probably want this to be airport service, which is kind of bad because the airport gets service to Sepulveda and somehow not in Norwalk, but not direct service to anything more interesting than that. That kind of sucks. But but I will talk about S-Bahn in a sec, I promise. And then I guess you need to do something really weird where you go here and either do a little bit of a loop. So this is about where you can build, and then you do this, and this is gonna look really weird on a geographically accurate map, but everything that hits an airport looks weird on a geographically accurate map. And then you go like this. It's BC. I guess this is BCH though. How are you gonna Sepulveda? Is this? Yeah. So maybe not PC. So maybe instead of PCHing, you do this. It's probably better. PCH It's fine, but I mean, it's not the bee's knees or anything like that. Then the problem is that, yeah, Sepulveda is very broken by the freeway. But that's fine because the train does not have to ever deal with Sepulveda being broken by the freeway. But it does mean that the TOD is going to be a little weird because of the way the freeway works. So you just be boring and go on Sepulveda, and there's always going to be a temptation. Now, and this is where I might be conflicting with plans. I don't actually know, but they're not building it right now, at least. And so here's what I'm going to say. The correct place to hit this north-south should not be wherever this hits Sepulveda. It's either UCLA or Century City, pick one. And so if you do Century City, then you do Culver City, Century City, and then cross Sepulveda Pass. All of this goes in a tunnel unless for some reason you want to go 5%. I mean, I guess you could do 5% grade on the freeway. The alternative is not Century City, but UCLA. Now, UCLA... So Greenland's plan to go to Santa Monica. Oh, so they are planning to do it? Wait, but what about Sepulveda? Because I know there are plans for Sepulveda. Yeah, no, just don't. I mean, I don't really think about Airport Express. It's like a bad idea to do Airport Express trains. Like Airport Express trains, Airport Express trains are just mostly because they're mostly for people who think that the government is evil because the government sometimes provides public services to people who are poorer than they are. Like, it's not that much of a thing. But, and by the way, about so I do want to mention something about job counts. Century City is big, as I said, but so when I talk about the RJ, so this is just me giving numbers. So UCLA actually has more jobs than Century City. And UCLA also has the students. So I think it's actually correct to treat UCLA as the center of the West, to treat Westwood as the center of the West Side, and not. And even then you could and then you do a second stop on campus. Don't try to be clever with just one stop, and then you transition to the freeway. So you still need to tunnel, but you don't tunnel across seismically active mountains. You use the freeway, you use you use the pass. And the thing is that the pass is not that steep. It's, I think, 5%. I think is the grade that you need on this. And they've recently expanded the 405 on this, so it's not something that they do not know how to do. And then there's a question of what you do once you hit the valley. And again, remember what I said before about the different... the way that nothing here is especially interesting unless you do TOD. And so, yeah, you can go north on Sepulveda, or you can do Van Nuys. Potentially also Bilbao and Reseda, but these are the more interesting ones, I think. So again, the plans center Van Nuys. It's easier to get to Sepulveda because Sepulveda Pass, and so here, if you're doing a greenfield tunnel, then you can pick wherever endpoint you'd like. But again, Sepulveda. But if you're not, then you probably do Sepulveda. And so I'm just gonna randomly draw a line on Sepulveda going up until until I'm gonna go to Silmar, maybe? No, not Silmar, San Fernando. So the point is to hit the commuter rail stations, or potential places for commuter rail stations. And obviously nothing this far out ever gets to be underground. Like, cut this to somewhere if NIMBYs complain. And instead we're going to change it from Century Line now to Sepulveda line. How long is it? 48 miles, 77 kilometers, which is long, but I mean, at least kind of exists in Berlin, almost exists in Berlin, whereas this just doesn't. Okay, this is where you do it of kind of existing lines or lines that are being planned. PCH is PCH is the highway. It's Route 1. Is avoiding mountain a cost measure specific to LA's context for me? Yes. So in LA specifically, so about avoiding mountains, you might be able to tell, and you may have been able to tell from movies. So this area is actually very well covered in Hollywood films because all the rich, snooty Hollywood people live here. Mulholland Drive, for example, is the peak of the Santa Monica Mountains, and the reason I know its name is from TV, not from looking at this very much. So the thing is, you do not need stations here. People who live here wouldn't be caught dead on a train. The people who clean their houses do take buses, but the houses don't. But I mean, the houses are never going to be TOD. So okay, you put one station at Mulholland or something. That's not actually going to help very much. It's still going to be a long transfer. So it's not a place where station placement matters very much. So you just want to get across the mountains. Now there are two ways to get across the mountains, which is the road or the tunnel, which is existing rights of way, of which I believe this is the only viable one that goes through Sepulveda Pass, or you build a tunnel. Advantages of building a tunnel: it is faster, it's kind of circuitous, not having to deal with highways. You can pick the exit point wherever you want, so you're not constrained. You can do Van Nuys again. Disadvantage: you're building several kilometers of tunnel across the mountain. So probably avoid doing that if you can. Oh, and remember, seismically active mountains. Like they did have to build some kind of movable chambers here when they built this 90s, early 2000s. So, so Green Line. Yeah, about Sepulveda using different rolling stock, yeah, because they're doing it as a turnkey system. They're doing it as a turnkey system because they think it's a separate line rather than an extension, so they can go crazy and pick monorails or whatever. But here's the thing: the lines, like the Green Line, this works much better connected with the Green Line than not connected with the Green Line, because this is how you make the system more coherent. And also how you, and also how you make something. You make lemonade out of this lemon, because this lemon is not this line. Remember, the lemon only goes from here, and then loops away from Alex. Yeah, also good is not nothing. But the whole point of jobs is to connect the jobs to something, and what is it connecting with? Not quite Norwalk. Fuck that. Here. And so. This is why I'm talking about it that way. And so, it's the core kind of system. There are other things that they should be doing. There's something called the Pink Line. No, the Pink Line is this horrible reverse branch. So, when the Purple Line, when the Wilshire extension was being planned, there were people in West Hollywood who were proposing something called the Pink Line. This was even studied as an alternative in the environmental impact report or tourism analysis. I'm forgetting which one. And they even tried to do both. So the Pink Line idea is a reverse branch. So it starts in the west, same as the purple, and then I believe goes like this. I'm forgetting whether. So I think the idea was to go like this and then hit the red line around here. So connect Beverly Hills and Westwood with Hollywood, which is okay, but it's not the most important thing in the world. And so the thing is, again, all of this depends on how much TOD you're doing. I mean, everything else is, everything else has to be downstream of that. So you can think in terms of network coherence. So in terms of network coherence, yeah, you want more lines serving downtown LA. So you need to think about more alignments hitting downtown LA. So here's an example of an alignment that can hit downtown LA. This is not something that has been planned at all, unfortunately. In fact, again, the plans keep sniping that, and that is Purple Line going east. Again, Whittier is the Whittier is the natural kind of analog of Wilshire on the east, and of course, LA is not symmetric around downtown. There's more stuff west and east, so it's not as strong a corridor. But that's fine. I mean, they can redevelop this. I mean, there's already gentrification here without much redevelopment, so you might as well actually do something. So let's start here because there's a commuter line, so why not? And the point, and this is just going to be a boring thing. We're just going to crayon the line on Whittier. This. You Google Earth tourism this, and there's just so much more in Whittier. Or in Cesar Chavez, not Chavez. Lemigra's favorite Hispanic American, the guy who had the brilliant idea of calling the INS on illegal immigrants because he was really against immigrants who we thought were lowering everyone's wages. So anyway, you do this, and then you figure out a way to get to a Union Station. Probably you want to go via Mariachi Plaza, because Mariachi Plaza is where you have, like, I mean, you're going to cross the Gold Line, so cross it at the station, so cross it here or here. This is probably more constructible. And again, it doesn't matter very much. Because you're just trying to hit, because this is all going to be a tunnel anyway, and you're hitting Union Station. So you're right. I believe the way it works is that the trains come from the south, so it's like this. So this is kind of what we do, and again, this is the core. These are some core lines. And finally important, before we talk about regional railroad, which you have to. Remember how we talked about South Vermont before? So how Vermont is the second busiest corridor on buses in the city. It goes Wilshire, Vermont, Western, and I think then Olympic, or at least it was Olympic before the Oxford line. Well, this should not be like this. This should start here, and by here I don't mean where I drew. I mean a lot farther south. We're talking St. Peter. And yeah, so you do this, and then you just go do a north-south line. And now the problem with this north-south line is that it doesn't hit downtown LA. And this is a big problem. There's so much grid element in LA that it's really hard to hit downtown effectively. Can you bridge over this? Probably not. So you're gonna have to do something that's annoyingly loop-de-loops around, but that's not the end of the world in any way. And then I'm trying to remember which side of the 110 you need, or even you can use the 110 for a second to switch to the right place, and then you want to go on Vermont. So as soon as you can hit Vermont, you go Vermont, and you probably do something like this, or potentially you go. Actually, maybe. You don't even do this. You don't even do the little bit of freeway stuff. You do this. Some places here are good TOD locations, and therefore will not actually be TOD because LA does not believe in either the T or the D parts of TOD. I mean, to some extent, it says it's very transit first, but not really. Okay, so do this, and I'm just gonna go scroll north to see how much deviation there is. Okay, so there's a little bit, so it's not perfectly straight for a moment. Okay, so we need to do this to keep it on track. And here we do this little kinked thing in order to get to the real alignment of, so you do this. Actually, South Vermont is really important. And yeah, it doesn't hit downtown, but it hits Koreatown. There's a good transfer. I mean, wrong direction, but still good transfer. I don't think this is a bad line. Yeah, it's really annoying that they're putting Century City and UCLA on a branch. This is really important to fix. And if you want to be even crazier with lines that don't quite serve downtown, you can even go with Crenshaw and have it go north and western a little bit. And then, I don't know, go to Glendale. It's not the best. And I'm ignoring the orange line, which goes like this and should be connected to Glendale and Pasadena. And again, there are other things that you could be doing. Again, you could do like some kind of, maybe you can do, remember I talked about the pink line? So you can do maybe a radial version of the pink line and without bullshit, without bullshit, what's it called? Reverse branching. So you figure out, maybe you go under Santa Monica or something and you figure out what to do when Century City and Westward are already spoken for. So you go on Santa Monica and then via Santa Monica you just did downtown like this. This might be a good idea. So this kind of pink line might be something you could do. There's West Santa Ana, which is one of these lines that I can see is kind of like 15 to be built, just desperately transit-oriented development. There was a line that I kept being confused about how Norwalk hits that, because it's this line, the West Santa Ana branch. I think it was actually, I think it was not actually Freight, I think it was originally Pacific Electric. So I believe it's, no, maybe I actually, no, it's actually this line, West Santa Ana. No, it's not no, that was a Freight line. This is West Santa Ana. It's a line that gets almost Santa Ana. And I think the plan is to not actually make an effort to get to the Santa Ana commuter rail station. But I'm maybe wrong. And so these are kind of these lines, and really importantly, I'm actually going to turn on the light for a moment. Sorry, I'm going to go for a moment to turn on the light more permanently before I talk about commuter rail, because that will take a while. Okay, so so the point of this is there are these rights of way that go from the valley. Especially, it's important for the valley, I think, for TOD. So I'm going to talk more about actually the less of the busy line. So the busiest LA commuter line is actually to San Bernardino, not, as you might have guessed, Orange County. I was constantly sure it was Orange County itself. So we're going to talk about northwest to southeast more than northeast to center to southwest. So northwest to southeast is actually going to start drawing in that direction because of the branching. Let's start actually from Irvine, a city known for its rather lousy homeowners association politics, the point where they tell you what colors you're allowed to paint your house in, and what sign. I believe that the rules are that you're not allowed to put any toys or what was that? Any toys or ornaments on your front yard. Except tasteful holiday ornaments during the correct holiday, and you must remove them when Karen says that you must. It's a very Karen town. Like, I mean, before the expression Karen existed, it would like that kind of character could be rendered as either just Irvine personified, or if you've seen the animation film Over the Hedge, it's the woman there, the one who's played by Allison Janney, who constantly worries about the property values. So that's Irvine. It's incredibly stifling, incredibly controlling, and is also a growing place with a lot of job sprawl. No, not job sprawl in the sense that the jobs around Southern. There's lots of jobs in the suburb, including Blizzard. Blizzard is headquartered there. I mean, Blizzard's also kind of a Hulk, but and I don't say its flagship product is StarCraft because it hasn't been that way for years. It's, I think, League at this point, maybe, or Diablo. I think maybe WoW. And so but the StarCraft team, for example, is they all entirely all of them left years ago and are building Stormgate. So this, I believe, is the current route gets by this, but that's the wrong way to do it because they are actually building Thuron tracks at Los Angeles Union Station, and I'm going to draw them as best I can, which let's actually say that it goes like this and ask people to trust me when I suggest that, like, maybe the purple line be rerouted, not rerouted, extended roughly along that line. Okay, so we do this, and then lines also go to, I believe they go right bank, not left bank, if I'm looking at this correctly. So it goes like this. And then this is also where they're planning on sending the high-speed trains north. This is something that might actually be less vaporware than plans going south of LA. So this. So here there's a split between two. So past Burbank, there's a split between two branches. There's Antelope Valley, which is where the high-speed trains are supposed to go, and there is Ventura County, and we're not gonna cry on as far as either Antelope Valley or Ventura County, but this is the Antelope Valley line, and we're gonna cry on as far as, let's not do Santa Clarita. Let's actually cut this as Silmer, you know. San Fernando Silmer, it's here. Maybe a little farther north because there absolutely can and should be infill stations. So this is Orange County, Antelope, Orange County, yeah, Antelope Valley line. I'm going to draw it in orange. Actually, not orange because that's an orange line. Let's do it. What's a good color for this line? Be gray. Like, I don't want to light blue. Like, it needs to be something that's very prominent. It also doesn't clash with pink or anything else that's proposed. Maybe, no, not lime. Let's just do white, you know. How visible is it? And this is just because of the Google Earth gray thing. I mean, I imagine on real maps it might look black like the northern line in London. And then the branch, this is called the Ventura County line because it actually does go into Ventura County, and this is a very straight line. The valley is pretty flat, the valley floor. And we're just gonna draw it as far as Chatsworth, site of the accident in the 2000s that got the FRA to demand that positive train control be installed on all trains. It should not be called path measure. This should be called Ventura County, not Count. The Count of Ventura. Who calls himself Count and not Earl because snooty French. And so this is kind of should be the main line. There's something called the Electrolink plan by Paul Dyson, who keeps trying to figure out how to advocate for electrifying this system, and also the San Bernardino line, and also the intercity line. This line is, so this system, LA to the southeast, is the most northeast corridor thing outside the northeast corridor, in that there's only one way you're getting between cities, in this case with San Diego, and that is this line. And it's also a busy commuter corridor, which should have more train service and not just rush hour trains that are diesel and barely make any stops and don't integrate with anything else. So they should plan on this being started as a 15-minute all-day corridor. So, but I mean, really think about it as 5 minutes and 5 minutes, so 2.5. I mean, maybe not 2.5 all the way to Irvine, but 2.5 in the core. The thing is, because it's a main corridor and parts of it are also parts of the Southern Transcon. So it's part of the Southern Transcon between Redondo Junction, which is I believe here, and Fullerton Junction here, I believe. So heavy freight, and I don't mean heavy freight in the East Coast sense of 5 trains a day. I mean, I believe busiest intermodal link in the United States. I believe 3-figure number of freight trains a day. So they need to separate, and this is money. And that's fine. It's money that's useful for intercity rail. It's useful for regional rail. They should pay it. They should be aware of what they're doing. And but once they do it, they're going to get a corridor. And the thing is, so the trains are still polluting diesels. I mean, the freight trains. So it's not the best location for TOD, but you go a little bit away from that, like 200 meters, and you're starting to be okay. So this is something that because the service level on the freight trains are so high, there's actually a lot of investment in the corridor. For example, the Southern Transcon is double track, and I don't mean this section is double track. I think it's actually triple track. I mean I believe the entire Southern Transcon between LA and Chicago is double track. And so yeah. Now the other thing, and this is the harbor sub, and so the other thing not to talk about. So there's also the San Bernardino line, which goes San Bernardino, this, and they absolutely should have just made it a better S-Bahn line and regional line instead of building the Foothills extension. But the important thing is, for the purpose of like the more urban parts of LA, I mean, yeah, there's stuff in Alhambra, but okay. No, the actual stuff they should have been doing is the harbor sub. And I need to tell people what the harbor sub is, I guess. It's harbor subdivision. It's this line. The track still exists, but at this point they're in the street, and that's never going to be anything rapid transit-y unless they're elevated, but this street is, because of the tracks, pretty wide. So not past the line. This is, oh shit, I'm still on path. So this is technically 33 meters, 110 feet, but mostly it's not building to building, it's parking lot to parking lot. So you can elevate the tracks there, and it's fine. And what you do is you run trains on this. And then the whole point is that this line cuts diagonally southwest toward LAX. And that is how you get from LAX to downtown LA. That should be the problem is they gave away the right of way to the Crenshaw line because they didn't think regional rail could ever work, and also people in Crenshaw demanded a train, and also they're building a very haphazardly in LA, and this is a problem. So again, this is something they certainly should have done, is ignore Crenshaw. If people wanted another north-south line, then build South Vermont. And yeah, people here are I believe this is like poor South Central, and this is middle-class black people. But still, Inglewood would have gotten this to downtown LA, so Inglewood would absolutely get a good connection. And again, LAX. And then, because this would be a terminus, the way it's drawn would not really be able to interface with the Green Line. Um, that way, once you're here, you just shove the line like west in this way toward the terminals. And then maybe here you do a landside terminal, and then a bunch of these terminals already have airside connection. Like I think the ones in the south, like 5, 6, 7, 8 or something, they have or 6, 7, 8. They have airside connections. I actually made such a connection, um, very quickly. In fact, so quickly that between that and the fact that I was flying in from San Diego. Yes, I flew San Diego to LA, to Vancouver. It was San Diego to Vancouver, LA. The There was so much spare time because I mean San Diego to LA flight takes what 10 minutes, and of course so the trip time is just so the trip time is just what's it called? It's just padding mostly. That I made it just in time, not for the flight it was booked on, but the flight on the same airline 2 hours before. And they checked and saw that they had empty seats, so let me on. They figured correctly that a satisfied customer, that, I mean, literally the seat is going away and they're getting a satisfied customer. That's right. It was on Alaskan Airlines. Probably if I speak favorably of an airline, I should at least mention its name. So you do this. I think this is the right of way of some kind of people mover that they're planning on building, except that the people mover doesn't really go anywhere. So you do this, and then you might need to do right of way widening, aka takings, aka annoying fights, but I mean, there's a road. They can elevate over the road. This is parking lots. I don't think any of this is any kind of high-end residential or commercial, so you can do this. I'm drawing it. I do this thing where I try to be anally accurate. I try to be anally accurate about things, but then I will have kind of exaggeration type separation when I draw multiple lines in the same right of way. Rather than drawing them at the actual spacing, which would just be invisible, they would look like one line. And this is a Google Earth thing, because in Google Earth, it's harder to control how the lines look when they're together, like which line is above which line. You might be able to see. You might have been able to see when I started this, when I started drawing the control line, that I forget whether it took over the green line or was hidden behind it, but it was but it was not possible to see both of them on the same line. So anyway, this is something that they should be doing. Again, it's called the Harbor Sub. Route into LA, whatever you want, to be honest. Not into LA, this is LA. Route into downtown LA. Let's do this. Just call it Harbor Sub. Sub is in subdivision, not as in the thing that docks at a clandestine harbor and goes around the oceans with really fun things, like you tilt the sub a little bit so you can roll a bowling ball down it. And then depending on what kind of sub you are, you either from time to time tag surface ships or just chill and go wherever you want, and or based on orders, but very loose orders deliberately, and listen in to see whether the country has been nuked to the point that you are required to shoot back. So the other thing that's kind of annoying is that the San Bernardino line, again, the busiest line, this is single track. If you're wondering why this is single track, they widened the freeway so much. I think they added bus lanes, and the way, I'm not sure where the rest of the American sample, but LA, the way it does busways is it's not going to convert lines from cars to buses. It's going to widen the freeway with bus lanes, and then when the buses get zero ridership, because who the fuck wants to ride a freeway bus, what happens is they open them to high occupancy vehicle. Um, so I actually don't think it should be a metro line. The reason it shouldn't be a metro line is because you have so much control over what kind of line it is that you want it to be a mainline rail. Because if it's mainline rail, then you could have intercities. I mean, intercities that are not diesel and are reliable. Let's call them California High Speed Rail when that stops being vaporware. But and then you can actually, so that's a regional and not an S-Bahn line, but I actually worked this out, and you can do a 15-minute service type thing with timed overtakes. And 15-minute service in the city is not good. For an S-Bahn, and yeah, I mean, look at the. I mean, it's bad, but it's only about as bad as the existing rail lines. And because you want to have that option, I think that in general, when you have airport links and you are unconstrained about what mode, the mode should be mainline rail. So S-Bahn / regional. One of the, I'm not sure which of these is named San Bernardino, but it doesn't matter. Like, you should serve both. So this is San Bernardino line. There also there are the 3 lines that I drew plus. I mean, the harbor sub is not a real line that exists, sadly. San Bernardino, Ventura, Antelope Valley. I guess it's 4 lines, and so Orange County, Antelope Valley, and Ventura, which are kind of branches of the same thing. San Bernardino, there are 2 more lines which I'm omitting. The first is the 91 line, which starts as Orange County, but then uses the Southern Transcon to get to San Bernardino. It's not a very good line. It's more circuitous, and it also has more freight. Whereas here, they actually separated this from the Union Pacific line to some extent. And then there's something called the Riverside line, which is just meh. Just doesn't pass through anything worthwhile. So right, this is kind of what I should be doing. I say kind of because there are more things. Okay, so stuff like a pink line type system where you go on maybe Santa Monica and then we can even drive, to be honest. Like do let's say just just downtown to Santa Monica. So you do Union Station, go in wherever direction you'd like. Probably, I mean, if we're going vaguely northwest, might as well hit Dodger Stadium. Serve Echo Park and Silver Lake, 2 places where if you require masks and proof of vaccination, you're gonna kill your entire ridership base. No, I think Los Feliz. I think Los Feliz is the one where the Twitter account Los Feliz Daycare is the one where it says that they only accept unvaccinated children. But hipsters say, or they're Gen X hipsters. Millennial hipsters are very different. Like millennial hipsters are probably the best place to look for if you want someone who supports mandatory vaccination. By mandatory vaccination, I mean I don't mean a law that says it in principle or you required vaccination. I mean the state actually going and vaccinating you. So yeah, the problem is like, I mean, you want to hit Century City, but are you just gonna turn it into a 4-track tunnel at this point? Are you gonna hit the canyon and then skip Century City and go westward or something? Just weird. And the way I'm gonna draw it is this is a second line to Century City. Here, whatever, and then you go back to Santa Monica, to Santa Monica Boulevard, and that does mean you're skipping Westwood. And it's not the best, but you do something like this. Right? And you can even make a case for like meandering from Century City to Culver City or something. Like you're getting very, like you're getting less constrained once you get past Century City, and by less constrained I mean there aren't good corridors, so you can carve things and declare that these shall be the TOD targets. Like you want maybe Venice, PCH. Again, they're decent corridors. They're just no great corridors. Is LA's biggest problem? And obviously, you should never terminate at Century City because if you're terminating at Century City, you might as well go to Westwood. So it's kind of this pickle where if you're only going here, you should go here, but if you're going past here, you should go via a different alignment to Santa Monica, except this would be a third line to Santa Monica, and at some point you need to ask yourself, who cares about Santa Monica that much? So let's just do it as, so let's just do the pink line as this and hope that people understand that I'm not actually proposing a reverse branch. What would this line be even called, because we're not allowed to use, let's call it the stadium line because of the service to the stadium. And yeah, I'll give it the pink color. Yeah, so you can do something like this, and that's fine. I mean, it's more service to downtown LA, which is good. It makes it a more viable business district. Like, again, the problem is that I guess you're competing with a more direct line. It's mostly a Hollywood to downtown LA line, and then this is just kind of tying loose ends. Like, the thing is, there's also a bunch of decent, no good north-south corridors. So again, Sepulveda is the most important, but there's stuff like PCH. You want to do something on Century City, maybe, if you ever turned these golf courses into something slightly more socially useful than a golf course, such as, okay, every land use is more socially useful than a golf course. Junkyard. Encampment for Antifa people. And when I say Antifa, I don't mean the Omasgiganets here. I mean the French ones who throw rocks even at other anti-fascists, if it's because People's Front of Antifa People's Front. What else would be more useful than the golf course? Empty land. A giant pit of broken glass. Maybe something more useful than these as well, but you get what I'm saying, I think. And yeah, so so anyway, so it's not a full LA crayon. Again, I don't know LA well enough to tell you how much to crayon, like whether how viable something like this is in Lancashire, or to what extent this line is viable or it's just literal crayon. What to do about the fact that Blue and it's not Blue, whatever you call this, and Expo share tracks through the core, and I think these are not fully grade separated. Even I think streetcar mode then tunnel, so it's the worst of both worlds. So I imagine eventually you need to turn both of these into rapid transit. These are not good light rail corridors because good light rail corridors fan out, and LA does not have a good branching structure for this. So eventually, yeah, you could be running LRVs, but you want full grade subs. So maybe you make this the main, not the main line. Maybe you make the existing alignment be Expo, and then cut this bit, and then do. You probably don't want to go direct here because a lot of downtown LA is here and not here. But something like this. I mean, you're going to be. I mean, all of this has to be deepboard anyway, so don't slavishly follow the roads. It's going to be expensive either way. Yeah, I'm not sure, but this is something that I used to crayon and probably is still viable. This annoying, but they still need to do this. The improvement in regional rail, yeah, this part especially is money, but they need to do it, I think. This, it's laughable that they haven't done already. This bit, so brown, green, yeah, I mean, Sepulveda should be happening. This is probably, I mean, again, in the way the main slag is not the choice of alignment. It's partly that they are not spending enough on core improvements. Like, this is really far behind everything. This is not even planned through 2060. And meanwhile, they're doing foothills. It's prioritization at the level of outer suburbs versus city. And again, lack of duty. So again, you can crayon, but I think this is a less useful exercise in talking about how then creating zoning codes. And by creating zoning codes, I mean none of this should be single family housing. I don't mean in the duplex or quadplex law. I mean all of these things should be 6-story courtyard buildings like in Berlin. Like floor area ratio 3-ish. It's not city, very center of the city, so 3 is fine. They don't need 10 here, obviously 10. And yeah, this is again more important. Like it's really important to get the zoning right. Is the main thing with LA. I mean, a lot of these lines, again, the best of these lines is actually being built, not all the way to the sea, but they're actually building this. Just that the ridership projection is shit because there's no TOD. So the main lesson for LA is not to cry on, but TOD. And it will take, I mean, all my crayon sessions are long. This one is no exception. So are there questions before you break? This says it's been 250, it's been 243 of recording. It's been a little longer. Like 245. This number is always a little bit too low. Like drop trains or something. What's the lag? We'll wait for this number. It's not terribly important. But again, this is 8 seconds. Okay, it's not terribly important. The exact mode. It's more important to make sure that you have. It's really important to have local service. Like Inglewood to downtown LA, South Central to downtown LA. Again, it's not the best location downtown LA, but honestly, the city can grow in that direction. And I mean, it's a riverfront. I mean, it's a river that's a concrete spillway, but there are plans to make the river like a real river with greenery and such. And if they do that, and that's actually gets more interesting. And I mean, there's already a gentrification aim called Arts District for this. And so yeah, they can do that. And again, don't just plant as an express train. That's bullshit. Like people are, and by people I don't mean Americans. I mean Paris and Seoul and Berlin are overrating airport transit at the expense of non-airport transit, and this is really bad, and they should stop. The typical LA, first of all, the typical LA person is car. So the typical LA rider, I don't think is bus, train, bus. Because bus, train, bus. I mean, which viable things are bus, train, bus, and not car? Bus, train, yeah, absolutely. Train, bus, bus. Where bus is for very poor people. But bus, train, bus, again, I mean, it's probably something that's going to be, and I say bus, train because, remember, downtown LA, not now because Corona, but in the 2000s and 2010s, I believe had a 50% model split. So 50%, not as a residential place, as a job place. So 50% of the people working in downtown LA, and I think it was a pretty restrictive definition of downtown LA. It's not 100 square kilometers, I wish, more like this bit. So about 50% of the people working in this area got there by public transit. So public transit, even in LA, is disproportionately downtown. It's just that in LA, I mean, even downtown workers, so in 50%, and bear in mind that in Manhattan, so people working in Manhattan, I believe 67% of them, not 50%, take the train. This is all of Manhattan, not just Midtown. And it's not 67% take the train or bus and 33% drive. It's like 67% take the train, 20% walk, and maybe 13% or maybe 15% or something like that drive. So no, and so it's 15% in LA, in downtown LA is probably like about 50-50. And so so a lot of the downtown workers drive. A lot of the then there are the secondary job centers. So I imagine the person who cleans Nakatomi Plaza, or the security guard at Nakatomi Plaza probably took a bus, and certainly would take the Purple Line if it existed in '88. But the people who like worked on the upper floors of Nakatomi Plaza, everyone's on board. So like here, but here it is more viable to take public transit. So it's mostly a class split around places like this, El Segundo, Westwood when the train gets there, or even when the train gets there. Wilshire again is a busy bus corridor. Wilshire doesn't get to Century City, but Wilshire does get to Westwood. LAX. Airports have so much working class work that is being completely ignored by various airport express proposals. Whereas airport local proposals, like normal parts of the urban transit system, they are downtown center, but are still connected to other things. These are actually viable. I mean, it's bus train usually, or train, but not just train, and yet better than bus where this train becomes unavailable because it's charging a fare that is like fuck you to the bottom. I don't say bottom 90%, that's the more dramatic. Bottom 50, 60, 70% I think for distribution. And yeah, no, so it's not about bus train bus. I mean, bus train bus is going to be on the margins of the system. I mean, you could do weird things like, I mean, do a branch with Torrance, maybe you could see that happening. And then drag this to the branch or something. It's just as a random connection point, but it's not about the connection point. That would be just about Torrance to that only. Or I guess in this case Torrance to Koreatown. Going south to Servants. Oh, like this? Yeah, I can do it. Yeah, I mean, I think one of my old crayons did that. It's just again, there aren't great lines here. Like you can do this maybe. Actually, yeah, we can try. I mean, if we're crayoning, we might as well. Okay, this is the direction it goes. Great. Where you go, I guess. So I guess you go. You do. You can build Century City as a crossing station. This is only viable if you kill the. What's it called? If you kill the golf course, here you just carve a tunnel. And you do Culver City and Palm Culver City and then Venice. You can do that. That's fine. It's a good idea. It's service to Venice. And you probably should string all the lines all the way to the sea, just because the beach in LA is such a big thing that it's its own ridership generator. Yeah, you could do that. That's fine. Not the most direct line, but that's fine. I mean, from Venice, this is the most. I mean, so look, the problem isn't from this point. This is from Culver City. The Expo line is faster. So this is a real problem with this line. It's not going to become some kind of relief line. To the Expo line, on the other hand, I mean, if they run a train every 10 minutes, rush hour, 12 minutes off peak downtown LA to Koreatown, like I mean, and that's the primary line. This is a secondary. I mean, what capacity? What relief lines? Like, ridership needs to go up by a factor of like, I don't know, 10, maybe not 10, maybe 5, 6, 7 for relief line for the towards relief line to even make sense. So this is mostly just essentially connect two lines that can throw on, if that makes sense. But yeah, anyway, but anyway, yeah, you can do that. Again, it's not the best line. Again, LA does not have great lines, but once you go past stuff like South Vermont and of course subway to the C plus Whittier, and there are you can kind of see how circuitous the various proposals are. It's just really TOD. Does that answer your question? By the way, don't forget that stream was reset early on, so this is a fake number. It's actually 3 hours. But recording is what's important. Because I know how many views I get on YouTube, and I know how many views I get on Twitch. And on YouTube, I don't just get 8 or 12 or 14 viewers. I get a lot more. So anyway, any final questions before we break? What do you mean, which city? Oh, which city has the best line naming? I don't know. I actually like numbered lines as branding. It's just that specifically I avoid branding when I crayon because I leave the branding to other people, which is why I never give the lines. Which is why I give the lines the most descriptive names rather than um, numbers or colors. Um, so I actually kind of like numbered lines, like Chinese cities or French cities or German cities. Yeah, sorry. Names are nice. Don't get me wrong. I like London names. I like Tokyo names, but I use them in crayon mostly because I want to be able to speak to people about a Sepulveda line or a South Vermont line or a Whittier line or a Foothills extension rather than uh, give them or a Crenshaw line and not give them cryptic sounding names like Green Line and expect them to know that I don't mean the actual Green Line but a completely but a line that is by majority length, not the current Green Line, or say Red Line and hope that people get that I mean a line again by majority of its length. It does not presently exist. This exists. This doesn't, but rather continues south on Vermont. Like this is why I keep. Like, this is why I like giving descriptive names. In New York, so if it's extensions, it's easier. If it's so we can talk. It's much easier to speak of a 7 extension or NW extension, but even then people just say LaGuardia. But if it's a new line, and if it's current that's de novo, which this one isn't, but I mean, remember I was concerning myself at the beginning of this video when I thought I would have time for more than one city. To things that don't have extensive things, like not Chicago or Little New York. I was concerning myself to things that are mostly de novo, and especially there, you need to make it clear where you're going. Yeah, I mean, I know there are a bunch of lines, but remember that the most important thing in LA is not how many lines you have or where they go, but how much DoD there is. So with a system like this, and let's also mentally pretend that I've added West Side. This mostly just means lots of DoD here, some DoD here, here. Obviously not LAX. Kill the golf course, DoD around Hollywood, DoD around. I mean, Koreatown is already again densest, like near tied for densest place in America outside New York, but like seriously, turn all of this into, Berlin, Prague, München, Zurich, Stockholm, Wien, like these kinds of cities, like the cities where like Euroblocks and so on is not this density. Like this is kind of ridiculous. Yeah, I know, but remember the nooks and crannies are a lot less important than making sure that the not nooks and crannies don't look like literally this, because this is ridiculous. This is for excerpts. This is not for near center of the city. I mean, remember, even in Tokyo, the subway doesn't go literally everywhere. It's just there's a hierarchy of planning in which the density near the subway is high, and the job density near the subway transfer points is high, and then the low density single family is far. It's the main lesson. And on that note, I'm gonna. Oh yeah, and extended. No, the orange line is already extended to the red. Like this is the orange line. It already goes to the red. I just didn't depict it because bus. But so they could be done light rail and then extended to Glendale and Pasadena, or unless you're saying extended to the gold, which is yeah. But anyway, Thank you all for watching, and I will see you. I'll see you again. I don't know if in 4 days or in a week. We will see. Topic as usual. I never know the topics in advance. They just come to me. If people have requests, post them. I actually read the comments. I don't get a lot of comments. I read email. I don't always respond to email, but I read email. Or ping me on Mastodon. Or if you like fascism on Twitter. So anyway, I will see you, and ciao ciao.